Whenever the age-old question of, what game do you wish you could play again for the first time arises, I often find myself turning to one specific title. It isn't the best game I've ever played, and it isn't even my favorite, yet it certainly left the most impact. Final Fantasy VII, a title that almost transcends my relationship with video games itself, a title that's constantly on my mind. And of course, it's a title that's iconic in the industry that's so near and dear to my heart. It told an epic adventure featuring a crew who was way in over their heads, had some pretty nifty gameplay, and set standards other creators still follow to this very day. It wouldn't be hyperbolic to say that it's one of the most important video games of all time. Sure, it definitely hasn't aged the best, mistranslations and all, and one could argue this game is borderline unplayable without the Switch port's ×3 speed, but none of this takes away from the impact Final Fantasy VII left on the industry as a whole. You don't have to like Final Fantasy VII, but if you clicked on this video, you definitely like something that Final Fantasy VII influenced, and I think that speaks for itself. Whenever I talk about this series in videos, I always make a point to reference this one specifically because no matter how much time passes, the magic FF7 aimed to capture is still, even to this day, unrivaled. So when the prospect of remaking one of gaming's most iconic titles arose, things seemed too good to be true. 2020, the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the introduction of where this story properly starts. You see, I was one of those people who never played the original. I saw the words Final Fantasy VII Remake and thought, oh, so they're remaking the original Final Fantasy VII, but just making it an action game? Cool! Even the idea of it being released in multiple parts over the span of multiple years and console generations didn't bother me. Watching those E3 trailers made the remake look incredible. And speaking as someone who had never played the original, it really sold the idea that we were righting some wrongs. Yes, the original Final Fantasy VII was the most expensive game ever developed at the time, but obviously when you see character art like this, and look at the models we'd end up getting, you can't help but feel with hindsight that there were definitely compromises made due to the technology of the time. The remake was the opportunity to go back and really flesh these ideas out, really bring these characters and this world to life. One could say things would be expanded. The combat looked insane, the newly orchestrated soundtrack was on point, and the hype was at an all-time high. In that brief time, it felt like the stars were aligning. The moment robbed from me as a child from a grumpy store employee was finally going to come full circle. And then, I played it, and yeah, I certainly got something out of Final Fantasy VII Remake, but remarkably, I didn't get the feeling I had built up for myself. So, as one does, I went back and played the original and, well, I think by now it's pretty clear that Final Fantasy VII Remake is much more than the faithful adaptation we were expecting. Oh, so much more. That remake in the title is meant to be taken literally. This is a sequel what-if scenario that features the original cast of Final Fantasy VII and takes place during the events of Final Fantasy VII, I think? This is real. That's actually what this game is. I'm not making that up. If you know anything about me, yeah, I wasn't a fan. With all the context in mind, I found Final Fantasy VII Remake to be one of the most bloated, messy, forced video games I've ever experienced. And it sets a very dangerous precedent for this series and what it's allegedly adapting. For how excited I was, and for how long I waited, I found it quite fascinating to see how fast my interest waned come 2022 upon the announcement of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I just wasn't interested. But then, the game came out. The wave of positive reception was overwhelming. It felt like something you had to be a part of. I mean, not speaking from experience. Not really a community person if you catch my drift. So I picked up a copy and wow, it doesn't even feel real. I've played this game in its entirety. I even tried going for 100%, and even after all that, I feel numb. When it comes to Final Fantasy VII Remake, my thoughts are not too dissimilar to the general consensus when it comes to people who don't enjoy this interpretation of Midgar. The gorgeous visuals, the insanely good presentation, the ridiculously bloated gameplay, the unnecessary changes to the narrative. Search any video that goes in depth on these topics and I pretty much agree with every point. I don't have much to add in that regard. Originally, I was content to let other people share their experiences and keep my thoughts to myself. But as time went on, what I had experienced in Rebirth wouldn't leave my mind. I'd be playing a completely different game or doing something else entirely, and all I could think about was Rebirth. It just wouldn't leave my head. I think something snapped in me, more so than it has in any other game. So I wasn't okay with sitting on the sidelines for this one, because I believe there's a dangerous cloud coming over the horizon. For this trilogy, for this series, and maybe even for this company. Quite the ominous omen indeed. Before we get started, there's a few things I'd like to clarify. Number 1, spoilers. Obviously, this game is still fairly new at the time of this video's release, so do know I will be spoiling pretty much everything in this game. You've seen the length, right? Number 2, and here's where we get to the first actual problem of this trilogy, Final Fantasy VII Remake covered the Midgar portion of the original, while Rebirth opts to adapt the rest of Disc 1. Yes, just up until the end of the first disc. Ugh. You're telling me that you're taking the original first disc and making it nearly 7 times as long? For what? When revisiting the original first disc of Final Fantasy VII for this video, it took me just about 17 hours to get to the end. Pretty reasonable. Doesn't sound like enough content? Feel like you're being shortchanged a bit? Well, how about 35 hours for a remake and just under 80 hours for Rebirth? What? Now I understand. The first disc contained the largest amount of content within the original, but this makes the trilogy really lopsided. 2/3 of it is disc 1! What does this say about the rest of the original? The story after that moment is something we can just relatively speed through? You see what I mean? We're not even talking about the game itself, and already so many questions pop up. Slowly but surely, the cracks are beginning to form, which doesn't fill me with much optimism. I'll put a pin in this for now because it'll be much more relevant later on. Lastly, I understand some of you might not react well when I put these creators' works on blast for this video, but I want to make it very clear that there is no malice behind any of my words. If anything, I envy these creators in a way. I mean, I know if I were given the scenario of Final Fantasy VII and asked to adapt it for modern day, I wouldn't be able to come up with half the shit they do in this game. That's for damn sure. And while I do envy and respect creators like Tetsuya Nomura, Yoshinori Kitase, and of course Naoki Hamaguchi, as well as the rest of the team who works on Rebirth, I'm not exactly much of a liar. So as we make our way to the Forgotten Capital one final time, I cannot convey anything but my honest and true thoughts. It's gonna get pretty rough, I won't deny, but it's for the sake of the game, the art, and to a degree, the creators themselves. Because for the many differences Rebirth has to its predecessor, the similarities it shares act like echoes in the endless omen that is the life stream itself. So, one last time, let's dive onto the planet and figure out what exactly Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's lasting legacy will be in this monster series. Oh wow, we're really just doing this. Yeah, even at the title drop, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just can't help itself. We open with Zack arriving at Midgar with Cloud in tow. Upon his arrival, Zack finds Shinra rounding up the members of Avalanche, including Aerith. Naturally, Zack goes off to save Aerith before Shinra can complete their abduction of her. And that's about it. That's all that happens. For those of you that are lost, let me clarify things a bit. At the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, we flash to what I can only assume is an alternate reality where we see that Zack survived his infamous final stand. This was interesting, if not a bit jarring, because it implied that Zack would play a huge part in Rebirth. If you're going to do the whole what if thing, might as well go all the way with it, right? I must commend the audacity to cold open with brand new Zack content. However, I can't ignore the cries for those who feel alienated. Whether you're familiar with the 1997 classic or not, this introduction leaves the player very confused about what's going on. Fans of the original won't know what to make of this because by all accounts, Zack shouldn't even be here. And those experiencing Final Fantasy for the first time will be lost because your only hint of his importance is a short CGI cutscene from the last game. There's not enough context for this to be organic. Zack has barely been involved, and he's now opening the next installment of the trilogy. I'll table this for now because don't worry, Zack here will be much more important later on, I can assure you. Going to the NIBELHEIM flashback directly. I mean, makes sense. This is the first major thing that happens after you leave Midgar, but I don't know, this just doesn't feel right. One of the most iconic moments in Final Fantasy VII, I'd argue, is right after leaving Midgar for the first time. Yeah, I know, nothing crazy lore-wise to see here, but walking out into the world map, seeing how big the game you're playing really is, and that iconic soundtrack, oh good heavens. It all comes together brilliantly, letting you know that your battle of Eco Rebellion was only just the beginning of a much larger epic. During the introduction of the original game, you're led to believe that the big bad is President Shinra, and it isn't until you escape from Midgar where the true enemy is revealed. It was a plot twist no one saw coming so early, and your reward for surviving such a frightful encounter is literally the world. It's your oyster. Go and explore to your heart's content. But seeing as Sephiroth was introduced, no joke, less than 2 hours into Remake, I guess we don't need that moment of reflection anymore. Nah, that can all take place off screen. Let's just skip to calm, I suppose. On the flip side, I think the Nibelheim flashback is almost masterfully done. When it came to setting my own expectations for Rebirth, one thing I was genuinely excited to see was just how far the visuals came when compared to Remake. One of the strongest aspects of Final Fantasy VII Remake was how beautiful everything was. It starts off perfectly with a spot-on, if not slightly padded introduction, and it doesn't stop there. I am happy to report that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is no slouch in this regard either. Playing on PS5 in performance mode, I found myself in constant awe just about everything I saw across the many biomes present. You see, the original PS1 200 total combined polygon count models from the original is what you saw, sure, but you imagined this. The sheen of the Buster Blade, the slight glint in Cloud's Mako-infused eyes. It's spot on. I literally could not imagine this game looking better than it does. And I mean, just compare the flashback to the original directly. Having that extra level of detail in these scenes is exactly what I imagine when I hear the words Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. For such an important part of the story, starting off in this strong a way is absolutely crucial for hooking players in, and it rightfully does. I just have one big problem. Playable Sephiroth. Now don't get it twisted, in concept, this sounds awesome. It adapts what happens in the original, kinda, and considering the combat of these remakes has been one of their stronger points, it sounds like a match made in heaven. But I'm kinda mixed. On one hand, the way Sephiroth plays is immaculate. You truly feel the godlike power with every swing of Masamune, and for how short this section is by comparison, it never feels intrusive. But on the other hand, now that Sephiroth is a lot more involved in the actual game portion of this section, I think the original, subtle point is kind of lost. Sephiroth was so much of a mystical badass before he would join your party, but you couldn't even touch his commands. He was invincible and could nuke everything with Blizzaga. It was a fearsome power that you could only watch and hope to reach as Cloud by the end of the game. I might be on an island here, but I always saw this original glimpse at Sephiroth to be a cute little reward for making it to that point of the game. We finally left Midgar, and things are finally starting to open up. Now yes, I understand the Nibelheim flashback is technically Sephiroth's origin story, how he went from the revered hero he was to the maniacal villain we come toe-to-toe against. So it makes sense to focus on him, but I think maybe they overdid it. It's almost like you're meant to care more about how you're playing as Sephiroth, the guy you know and love from Remake, even if it kind of distracts from the humble beginnings of his story. And here, you're given not one, but two completely out of context scenarios thrown right at you from the beginning. I mean, I know what's from the original here and what isn't, but I can't imagine what it's like for someone who's going through this blind. I can only guess that there'd have to be some sort of whiplash here. In the span of what? The first 20 minutes of the game we see 3 different versions of Cloud? Cloud in the flashback? Cloud narrating the flashback itself? And this Cloud here, that Zack is carrying. Yeah, there's a lot to take in. And in some moments, I really do enjoy it. Some portions of this flashback in Rebirth straight up feel like a horror movie. If you thought the original was chilling, your bones will start shaking when you see how Rebirth interprets Sephiroth's rampage on Nibelheim.
Wait for me. I'm coming.
Sephiroth!
And sure, this is exactly what I was expecting, and what I wanted for that matter, but here's the thing. In the original Final Fantasy VII, the Nibelheim flashback lasted like 20, maybe 30 minutes at most. It was definitely important, I don't want me specifically referencing the time to take away from that, but it was quick, concise. You got the sick iconic shot, and you were back on your adventure. But in Rebirth, that 30 minutes is stretched out to nearly 2 hours. Was this really necessary? I understand that all sounds a bit hypocritical, seeing as how I praised a lot of what Rebirth has expanded upon the original, but when it's 4 times as long, at some point that nagging feeling of bloat starts to creep its way back in. I think Cloud's reunion with his mom is very heartwarming. I think Cloud sneaking around Tifa's house is charming. I think Sephiroth fucking slashing the citizens of Nibelheim is terrifying. But I can live without this. This doesn't really move me at all. And fuck whatever the hell this is. So far, things are going fine. There's a lot of potential, but there's already some concerns, and we're not even into the game proper.
After 5 years, doing who knows what.
Because he wants to finish what he started. He wants to reclaim his birthright and rule over the planet with Jenova at his side.
Similar to the original, after the Nibelheim flashback, we find ourselves with our main characters reminiscing on the story that's just been shared by Cloud and Tifa. Another positive I'd like to mention is just how well these characters are being portrayed. There's something about these characters that you just can't mess with. One of the most important aspects Remake needed to nail was how they would be brought to life. And man, no matter what, seeing these characters do just about anything in Remake is such a damn treat. Combine the stellar voice acting with the near lifelike animation and you get arguably the most visually stunning video game ever. I ain't kidding. It pleases me to say that Rebirth continues this trend magnificently. Even in just this scene here, there's so much life and personality to everyone present, even the ones trying to act all cool and calculated or whatever. Little moments like this are definitely appreciated, but what happens when those moments become not so little? In the original Final Fantasy VII, after learning Sephiroth's backstory in Calm, you just kinda moved on to the next part of the story. But since it's 2024, things can't be so simple. Instead, we have to take the time to marvel at all the fancy assets the team crafted by lingering on shoehorned plot devices from Final Fantasy VII Remake. So in Remake, we were introduced to these weird ghosty things oh so fittingly named the Whispers of Fate, beings who exist to preserve the original Final Fantasy VII timeline, in contrast to the changes present in Remake. Building off that, the most egregious change made to Final Fantasy VII Remake's narrative has to be with the Aerith revival plot. While it isn't necessarily told to you, it doesn't take an Einstein to know that Aerith telling Tifa that things aren't set in stone definitely treads on changing fate territory. You feel me? Fast forward a bit, play an entire video game, and you come face to face with the literal God of Fate, which upon its defeat spells the end of the Whispers of Fate as we know them, or at least so we were told. This is all to say that Aerith lost these memories she never had at this point in the original, mind you, because the Whispers are, for lack of a better term, excommunicado. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. The game never tells us why Aerith no longer has these memories. We're just kinda supposed to take this at face value. Well, that's a lot to take in. But hey, that's fine. Tifa decides she can't wait till morning, so she decides to bother Cloud. So they go outside to get some privacy and... Whoa, Jesus! What is going on here? It's only been like 30 seconds and already I'm completely lost. Let's see if I got this right. We go from backpedaling one of the wildest parts about Final Fantasy VII Remake to then adding in a completely new subplot in the next immediate scene? Wow, I am at a loss for words. Truly, I don't even know what to say. We just spent 30 or so hours building this Aerith revival plot in the last game, only for it to be tossed aside in only a few lines here? I was never a fan of this plot anyways, sure, but after all that buildup, one might be foolish to think that they were going somewhere with this into Rebirth. But no, just toss in the old amnesia cliche. That'll keep them guessing. What did this add? Yeah, sure, I'm okay with retconning the Aerith revival plot since it was something I really hated in the last game, but this is Show Don't Tell 101. Was there really not a better way to convey this information? Considering in the last game it was never implied she lost any memories when passing through this interdimensional warp gate thingy. So how did this happen? Was her knowing the events of the original Final Fantasy VII solely dependent on the whispers of fate? Well, you could have fooled me! One can make the assumption that they're linked, seeing as they're the two biggest deviations from the original, but never is it in any way, shape, or form conveyed to the player. You're just supposed to assume that this is the case because, Geez, if I'm going on like this for just this small scene here, I'm actually pretty worried where things are gonna go from here. So how does Rebirth handle the city of Calm, the first city you visit after Midgar? Alright, I guess. Gotta be honest, the scenery here really didn't move me all too much. It's absolutely gorgeous and all, but I don't know, it's just not hitting the same. The city of Calm was quite the unique little city in the original. You came here for your mandatory story cutscene, sure, but again, it was the first real place you visit after Midgar. It was only natural your curiosity would get the best of you and you'd want to explore the city just to see how different it is from Midgar. You just spent the first 6 hours essentially getting harassed by every person you interacted with. Calm offered quite a different, more relaxed vibe, which I believe was a nice, efficient way of world building. But here, you have all this mandatory bullshit they expect you to do before you can really get to the stuff you want to see. I like interacting with my party members in Calm. If I'm being forced to hear chatter, these are the people I want to be talking to. Not Broden, the ex-Shinra soldier turned hotel manager, or random weapons vendor guy. Like, what purpose do these random NPC characters serve? I'd love to know. And the padding. Oh, the padding. Instead of just leaving Calm like in the original, Shinra decides to show up and block our normal means of escape. So now we have this section where Cloud and Aerith need to sneak away from Shinra as the troops interrogate the town. Oh, and did I mention you perform said action very slowly? Ugh, look, I get it, but holy shit, man, I'm pretty sure I paid $70 for a video game, not an interactive movie. This, however, was all to build up to the moment of true peak. And listen, I've been pretty negative so far, but even I have to admit, when you take those first steps outside of Calm and the camera pans outwards, it just hits different.
Wow. Just look at it all. It's so green.
For as cynical as I was towards the intro, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't absolutely captivated when I saw the Grasslands for the first time. I mean, how could I not be? The environment is breathtaking. The lighting is on point. The rendition of Hollow is spot on. Whenever I pictured what the original Final Fantasy VII was like when I was younger, this is what I imagined. This massive, gorgeous landscape where I could go wherever I want, when I want. For a long time, I've always looked at the industry and wondered what aspects we can push further, bring these works of art to life even by just a bit. And this right here is exactly how you do it. If the goal is to make Final Fantasy VII's art style more realistic, then I'm all for it, especially when it leads to set pieces like this. Can we even classify this series as anime anymore? Beyond just the obvious tropes here? When the game finally released its storytelling shackles, I spent the first 3 hours or so running around so I could just kinda take it all in. Final Fantasy VII Remake felt pretty claustrophobic regardless of how much was added. Although I could have done with just a bit more freedom, this made sense. You were essentially trapped in the city of Midgar, the manufactured city of Shinra. Things feeling a little packed in was fitting, but from a gameplay sense, oh man, we might be redefining the term linear here. It is quite refreshing to have things open up more. Like, I'm really not a fan of open world games normally, and maybe my Final Fantasy VII bias is showing here, but something inside me just felt compelled to go and see and do everything. Which finally brings me to the first portion of gameplay, the first major change Rebirth introduces, and that is of course the many activities there are to partake in across the many biomes present in Rebirth. Rebirth. Oh, you thought this was all for show? Nah, my guy. For you see, every single biome present in Rebirth is filled to the brim with all sorts of wacky activities for you to engage with. And for what reason, you may be asking? Remember... Chadley? You know, one of the many new characters added in Final Fantasy VII Remake? He takes a page out of the team's book and leaves Midgar to go and research the many wonders of the planet. But come on, look at this guy. He ain't going to be able to handle the many dangers of the world. So naturally, he enlists the help of Cloud and the others to help him in his conquest for knowledge. I think these short little pieces of optional content go a long way in terms of world building. I can't imagine how unbelievably boring these environments would be if there was nothing to do but fight monsters. You need stuff to do in between the big cities and towns you'll be traveling to, so in that regard, I think they're very cool. If you're so inclined, it really forces you to navigate the landscape in ways you previously didn't think you could. Oh, don't worry, we got plenty of Nomorified gameplay. I'll let you decide what that means for yourself. But I was very surprised to see the many different paths I can take to get from place to place, especially when navigating one of the biomes for the first time. Sometimes I honestly forgot there was even a story to engage with here. There's just so much shit to do you'll forget that we're meant to be saving the planet. One thing about the original Final Fantasy VII that rubs people the wrong way is how at times it can be difficult to navigate where exactly you're supposed to go. 3D models walking on 2D planes aren't exactly the most ideal conditions for the player, I understand. But in a weird way, it added to the larger scope of the original. Like many other aspects, it evoked this feeling you could only get in Final Fantasy VII at the time. And that feeling is recreated marvelously in Rebirth. So yeah, there's a lot going on. Many activities to spend your time on, lots of stuff to dig your teeth into. On top of the fact everything looks this good, man, I'm really excited to see the Grasslands in their full capacity. Let's get the show on the road! Wow, I think I'm good with the Grasslands. Definitely ready to move on because this place drags on like you wouldn't believe. For as much as I can praise the environment itself, these activities really are nothing more than just busy work. I really wasn't expecting much after the stinker remake put in for its side content, but holy moly. In a sense, things definitely improve. I genuinely like going around and doing the hunting challenges because it always led to a cool optional boss. And I didn't even mind these shoehorned Ubisoft towers because I'll never get sick of looking at this gorgeous scenery. Everything else, however, is uninteresting filler. Trying to catch a chocobo is like pulling teeth. Examining the life stream and researching the summons are performed in almost the same exact manner. And the proto-relic minigames. Oh my god. When you're spending a majority of your time in these places doing nothing but running errands, it rips you right out of the experience. I get it, it adds to the world of Final Fantasy VII. I definitely see a world where someone really enjoys this stuff. But for me, it's nothing short of aggravating because it feels like I'm making compromises at almost every turn. I have no issue going to the location of these minigames because the fun here is the journey itself. I haven't mentioned it yet, but Cloud's movement has been tweaked ever so slightly for these enormous sandboxes, and he is a dream to control, so I never had a problem traversing the world itself. But then I get to said location and I have to interact with something that ruins the pace of the entire game. Did we really need to go gather research on the summons 3 times? Is there any specific reason it takes like 4 years for my chocobo to dig up one single item? You see, I did say I wanted things to do in the open world, but this is the best we could come up with? Sure, I guess it is kinda cool that you learn more about each region, and I'm obviously not gonna complain about getting an extra summon materia, but what was gained here? Lore that won't interest anyone besides the hardest of hardcore anyways? Minigames that only act as a way to make sure you're awake? Was no one spot checking these things before release? It honestly feels like Rebirth is intentionally putting a target on its back. You're either gonna think these are the coolest things ever, or the most boring part of the entire game. There's no in between, and as I've made pretty evident, I don't think quite highly of them. Mind you, this is only the first world you explore. In terms of story, not much to say. Truly, I wish I could provide more commentary here, but things play out almost exactly like the original. After getting a chocobo from Billy, which has now turned into this whole ordeal, we make our way across the swamp. And I gotta admit, it's at this point where Rebirth actually goes pretty hard. Yeah, the Midgar Zolom boss fight is no doubt my favorite boss fight in the entire game. What was once optional content has received a transformative glow up. I neglected to tackle the beast this time around when capturing footage of the original, and I definitely regret doing that. Not that it could hold a candle to the absolute insane spectacle we have here, all accompanied by that scorching soundtrack. It has everything you'd want from a boss fight of this scale. It's frantic, plenty of chances to experiment with your play, and relies on you having a solid understanding of the mechanics to succeed. All that time frolicking in the grasslands was not wasted. You need to figure out which team comp is best suited for you before you attempt to face the Zolom. This level of thinking is exactly what I want in a long-ass JRPG. Give me the tools to experience these battles in the way I want. This is one of the only things I'm okay with making what was once optional mandatory because it's just done so well. In what was effectively one roller coaster amongst a theme park of content here, I have to say, I think Rebirth handled this fight pretty well. Really, not much else to add here. I surprisingly had a lot of fun with it. Too bad Rebirth decided to add in bullshit. Sephiroth appears after the Zolom overwhelms Cloud and just yeets it straight to its demise. And he follows this spectacular act by just leaving. Yup, Cloud closes his eyes and he's just gone. Okay? Can someone please tell me what the hell that was? Why is Sephiroth here? Did he just want to showcase his strength? Well, having Sephiroth show up like this only asks more questions than it answers. Seriously, we don't need to see this. Sephiroth's power isn't exactly a mystery anymore. This intense, action-packed scene is completely kneecapped now because the threat that nearly killed us just got tossed aside so easily. Sephiroth couldn't even let us have that triumphant moment of victory, could he? Fucking asshole. And if that wasn't enough, the Cave of Mithril, you know, the path you would originally take that took like 10 minutes to get through, has now been turned into this entire event which includes such riveting gameplay as holding triangle to flip switch, character swap detours, and everyone's favorite, pushing minecarts back and forth. Oh, jeez. So here's the thing. Areas like the Cave of Mithril weren't meant to be anything more than connecting tissue to the areas you actually needed to go to. Yes, there might be a mandatory cutscene or two, but more often than not, these cutscenes were implemented to flesh out the characters rather than the narrative. It was simple, it was concise, and it was effective in what it was trying to capture. In regard to Rebirth, however, there was just no need for any of this. It could have just been a slightly expanded take on the original, but now it's filled with all this padded out fluff that takes like an hour. Who was asking for this expansion to the Mithril Cave? Seriously, who played the original Final Fantasy VII and was like, yeah, this is fine and all, but it needed more Barrett sections where you shoot rocks to progress. Eventually, you meet up with Elena and Rude. Just Elena and Rude. No Reno this time. Guess he's off helping President Rufus with whatever he's doing? But hey, this is the big introduction of Elena. First time seeing her in HD. Let's see how Rebirth decides to incorporate the latest member of the Turks.
Feast your eyes on the Turks' latest and greatest, Elena. But you three can call me your worst nightmare. Where's Reno?
On vacation.
And unfortunately for you, I'm here to fill in.
She may be new, but she's still a Turk. And a consummate professional.
Oh, we're really just squaring up, aren't we? Yeah, I guess this is one way to introduce yourself, Elena, but I think this might just be a little much, don't you think? Stuff like this really stops feeling special when it happens all the time. Like as if to make up for the aforementioned boring filler, the game converts classic set pieces into Disneyland attractions. Sure, you do run into the Turks at this point in the original, but all that really happened was you showed up, they talked shit for a bit, and then you were on your way. It just doesn't feel earned, you know? Beating the Zolom could have acted like the final test before you proceed onto Junon. One final bombastic event before leaving the grasslands behind for a while. It would have been perfect! While I respect the intent to adapt everything from the original FF7, stuff like this could have been scrapped and I don't think we'd be losing much of value. It's just too much.
That city they're headed to, is that...
Junon. Shinra territory. Come on.
We've now reached the part of the story where Cloud and the team need to make their way over to the under Junon portion of the city. Similar to the Grasslands, the open area of the Junon region was relatively smooth to traverse through. No real problem moving around, but once again, I need to dock points because if the Chadley requests in the Grasslands felt like busy work before, they're downright infuriating in Junon. Instead of that though, I want to take this time to discuss something I've been putting off far too long now. The combat. If there was one thing that unequivocally needed to be considered a success, no question it would have to be the combat system. I mean, consider what we're trying to emulate here. The original Final Fantasy VII's combat mechanics are some of the most well-revered and I'd argue innovative mechanics in a turn-based RPG. The amount of ways you can build your character by min-maxing your party composition is still, even to this day, wildly satisfying. So when deciding to adapt this game for the modern age, the combat was obviously the portion of gameplay that would see the most changes. Going in the direction of real-time action is totally fine by me. Now, your imagination when hitting attack on the menu is fully realized. For what is essentially Final Fantasy VII with Kingdom Hearts combat, I think it serves its purpose well. It functions well enough, the animation is on point, and the idea of playing as a cohesive team is ever present. But since Remake itself feels really packed, the combat suffered a bit. I am happy to report that Rebirth goes quite a long way in addressing some of these issues. Firstly, the overall flow is much smoother right out of the gate. Switching between party members is faster. The animations are even sleeker now, and everything feels like we've moved up one tempo or so. Things just feel snappier, evoking a sense that our team has only gotten stronger since their struggles in Midgar. And with all this space to maneuver around, the opportunity to be creative and experiment with your play is constant. I chose to discuss the combat now because it was in Junon where I felt like these mechanics started opening up. The enemies here have a lot more going on than those in the Grasslands, so I had to start experimenting in ways I didn't think I could. Trying different team comps to see what fit my playstyle, experimenting with different materia to see which role each party member would play, and even going so far as to experiment with different moves you could acquire in the revamped weapon system. Similar to the open world, the combat is a lot more involved, which I prefer because it does a brilliant job emulating the original. I wouldn't say it ever reaches the insane peaks of the original's experimentation, but don't mistake Rebirth being a slouch in this regard. Seriously, I can talk technical all day, but just look at how much better everything looks compared to Remake. Even if Rebirth is borrowing the majority of its mechanics, it feels like its own thing, which the game needs so it can forge its own identity. Barret is still the go-to long-range option. If quick combos are your game, then you'll feel right at home controlling Tifa. If you're feeling overwhelmed, just have Aerith equipped with a healing materia and she'll take care of the rest. Each of Cloud's initial teammates have all received new abilities, but if you're familiar with their movesets from Remake, chances are you're just going to default to what you did in that game. Maybe I shouldn't have played these back to back, but I feel like I was wasting many of the options made available to me because I already had a plan that worked most of the time. While that is a bit unfortunate, Rebirth does offer a few additions that do spice the combat up a bit. The newly added characters. Red 13, Yuffie, and Cait Sith join the fray, each equipped with their own unique movesets. Red's rage is let loose as he thrashes and slashes his enemies to their peril. I was interested to see how Cait Sith would be integrated, and I think they nailed it. He has a lot of luck-based roll of the dice skills that always kept combat fresh, and I have to admire how well the control feels between both Cait and his robotic Moogle, but those two pale in comparison when Yuffie comes into the picture. I don't even know how to put this. She's just so good. Super quick slashes with her little Beyblade, the ability to throw it at an opponent to deal damage at long range, and the best skill in the game, the ability to change the elemental affinity of your attacks. Who cares about any of the other characters when Yuffie can do all this? She feels like a mix of all the other party members. She deals long-range damage like Barret and Aerith. She's quick with her strikes like Tifa, and she can lay the smack down with the best of them like Red. Combine all that with her ability to change the nature of every fight, and Yuffie becomes a force to be reckoned with. Easily the best character to play as besides Cloud. Speaking of which, Cloud has no doubt seen the most significant changes in combat. While he does obtain new abilities as he levels up each weapon, the thrill of controlling the protagonist this time is how much swagger you can flex. doesn't matter whether you're operating at an efficient level or punishing your foes. The animations have been tweaked ever so slightly to a point where a new level of experimentation can be explored. Now, you want to explore all of Cloud's input commands just to see how far you can take these mechanics. Not to sound like a broken record, but sure, I could play like this, yet fighting like this is just way more fun. I had a blast playing as Cloud this time around. For the most part. Some of these decisions are no doubt made for the better, like I've mentioned, but then there are some that are definitely, questionable. The first being aerial combat. Now in concept, this is excellent. It's adding even more to Cloud's repertoire of skills. Knocking enemies into the air tends to offer unique opportunities to continue the combo. Plus, it just looks really cool. There are definitely times where lining up an enemy and launching them in the air can be the difference between victory or failure. So for the most part, I'd say the addition of these aerial moves could be seen as a win. It's just there's one little teensy thing about all this that just really drives me up a freaking wall. So let me break it down for you. You're fighting some enemies, right? Things are going well, you're having fun. Then you launch an enemy into the air and... Oh, sweet Mary of Mercy, not again. Similar to Sora in Kingdom Hearts 3, as soon as Cloud yeets himself into the sky, you'll never have to worry about falling as long as you continue mashing the attack button. Do I even need to get into this? If you've played Kingdom Hearts 3 or seen my video on it before, you already know what to expect. It removes any challenge against every enemy, it halts the pace of the entire fight, and of course it makes every fight feel very samey. I once again must question the intent here. If everything can just go down in this fashion, why should I seek an alternative? Unlike KH3, Rebirth is actually quite the challenging game on the standard difficulty. Sure, most fights could be handled with no issue, but some of the later encounters genuinely had me sweating, and had me refining my skills to an iron firm point, but I couldn't help but think that I was kind of wasting my time. There was clearly one strategy that was meant to work here, so anything else I was doing was kinda superfluous. Why should I take the time to experiment with the all-new sword skills when launching an enemy into the air, wailing on them for a bit, and casting Firebolt Blade does everything I need it to? And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. I do really have to admire just how far the team was willing to go in terms of improving what was in Remake. When it comes down to it, I vastly prefer the combat system here. It's just unfortunate I never really went out of my way to see those changes. What I'm doing against these grunt enemies, I'll be doing against the Terror of the Deep. And it's probably what I'll be doing by the time I get to Sephiroth. And forgive me for a second, but doesn't that just suck? We finally got all this space, all this freedom. Having one solution to nearly every problem just doesn't feel right. When I'm spending multiple sessions building my characters out, I want to take all that time I invested and have it directly affect what I'm doing. But unfortunately, it rarely does. And while I wish that could be the end of it, there is one other issue that is just crippling. One of the more frustrating parts of Final Fantasy VII was navigating its admittedly clunky menu system while in combat. Gotta respect the attempt, there was a lot going on while engaging your enemies for sure, but gotta be frank, this isn't exactly great conveyance. What added to this was it was all real time. Even while you were making your decisions and strategizing on the fly, the enemy could wail on you if you hesitated for even a moment. Now that we're taking that and converting it into an action game, how does Rebirth decide to integrate its menu system? Oh geez. Nah, this can fuck off. This is no doubt my biggest issue with Rebirth's combat system. Oh, it's just so fucking bad, man. To be fair, this isn't anything new to this series. This was introduced back in Remake. But if there ever was a cardinal sin in an action game, literally pausing the game to decide what you want to do has to be the one. There's no doubt in my mind. This isn't pausing the game to go to the bathroom or pausing the game to change your settings or something. No, this is literally a core mechanic in the game! Having the ability to pause the game whenever you want to literally choose which skill you want to use contradicts the entire point of this being an action game. Things are supposed to be frantic. Quick decision making is the key to success. Yeah, sure, there is a shortcut system and it certainly does speed the process up, but eventually you'll just have too many things to choose from that you'll have to press X to make time stand still. Like seriously, imagine you're going toe to toe with like this enormous monster. Things are frantic. You're narrowly dodging each of its attacks. But uh-oh, ran out of MP. Gotta pause the game if I want to replenish my magic, I guess. I can definitely see the argument that this sudden stop of play is useful since it allows you to strategize your next move and even a few beyond that, but then that raises the question, why implement it in the first place? For the many benefits it gives, this slight pause above all else ruins the flow of combat. It doesn't matter what the situation is, you'll always feel this jarring halt every time you need to interact with the menu. I understand I sound like a bit of a dick going on about such a small thing, but when you interact with it as much as you do in Rebirth, it accentuates the problem even further. Fuck man, no matter what you do, you just can't escape it. Wanna cast magic? Pause. Wanna use an item? Pause. Rinse and repeat over and over again. And like, I played a bunch of the original before making this video. I don't remember that game ever pausing like it does in these games, so what gives? Rebirth is obviously trying to mimic the original's menu system, so I could see the argument being, well, if you don't interact with your menu in the OG, you can just sit there and wait. But why would you do this? Unless you're trying to come up with a strategy, there's really no reason to wait, let alone the fact this is something you have to do intentionally. In Rebirth, there's no escaping the pausing. We already have 4 separate shortcut slots. Why the need to slow things down? Sorry, but no. I don't think the marriage of real-time action and turn-based combat meld together well at all here. I can enjoy the window dressing as much as I want because similar to a lot of bad games in this series, the combat itself looks brilliant. Zipping around at almost sonic speed, and with animations like this, how could it not look stunning? But when 2 of the major components feel this hamstrung, I just can't get into it. Something I personally love about action games is how by the end, you end up feeling like you're one with the characters. I think I've just spent so much time in this genre that there's always a point where everything eventually comes together and everything feels like it's in perfect motion. At that point, you're not even thinking. Your button presses just seem to be coming out on their own. Not to sound too cliche, but it feels like you're in the zone. And this feeling just never happened in Rebirth. I was constantly distracted by the invincible air trick and the fucking pausing to even be able to get to that point. For as much as I like and prefer the refined combat system here, there's just those 1 or 2 things that seriously hold it back, to the point where even after all this time, I still prefer the original Final Fantasy VII combat mechanics. Isn't that crazy? Look how far we've come. Look how much more expressive you can be in Rebirth. But at the end of the day, when combat can come to a halt and when Cloud can mimic Sora and build real estate in the sky, I'm kinda just over it. It's actually quite impressive how Square took the iconic menu-based command system we had back in 2002 and found a way to ruin it. Something even Kingdom Hearts 3 got right. The sad fact is that all of this could be addressed with an option to select in real time. So at this point in the story, we have to make our way over to Upper Junon. But to do that, we're going to have to save Priscilla. Oh boy. One of the most unique aspects of the original Final Fantasy VII was how there were characters you could find at random that eventually could join your main party. First among these characters was the materia-loving ninja from Wutai, Yuffie. Now I understand, expanding was never going to be left to just the world design or the gameplay. It's only natural that it would extend to the characters themselves and the roles they each would play. This makes a lot of sense, plus it would give players a chance to see characters they otherwise would have missed. Optional or not, these characters are part of the reason why Final Fantasy VII is as well regarded as it is. I mean, I like Yuffie well enough, and her portrayal in this remake trilogy is superb, but I start to wonder what message we're sending here. Technically speaking, this isn't Yuffie's debut in this series. No, she actually had a brief DLC campaign in the remake Integrate update that introduced a new plotline with, you guessed it, all new characters. It feels like Rebirth is playing tug of war with itself. We can't stray too far from the original, but we need to find a way to make sure everyone knows who Yuffie is. What was once this character that you could find exploring the vast world the planet had to offer now feels like a character that has more importance than some of the main cast. I can't stress this enough, but there is a very good chance that someone has played Final Fantasy VII and has no idea who Yuffie even is. So imagine the what? Huh? Moment they'll have when she steals the spotlight from everyone else. The focus in Lower Junon was never placed on any one character. You came here and realized just how far Shinra's reach was. Even after leaving Midgar behind, the corporation's shadow was always ever looming. It was times like this, passing through these small, run-down towns where you'd really feel the weight of the mission. It offered a moment of reflection, a way to ground the characters to put their agendas aside for the larger task at hand. Sure, if you had to add her as a main party member, I guess this would be the way to go about it, but then I think about how much bigger everything is and I can't help but wonder, hey, why not put her in one of these side quests? Seeing as how the days of random encounters are long behind us now, there's no better way to incorporate her. Plus, it would go a long way in terms of environmental storytelling. We have these stunning, gorgeous landscapes at our disposal. Use them! It's not a big deal, really, but I find it very distracting. It's kind of hard to focus on the terror of the deep boss fight when my mind is still reeling from Yuffie's introduction. Similar to the Nibelheim flashback, the focus has now been placed on Yuffie, so you'll neglect anything else Rebirth attempts to convey. If you've played the original, you'll be wondering how Yuffie got here, and if you haven't, you'll be wondering who this even is. What could have pleased everyone ends up dissatisfying some. Luckily, Rebirth redeems itself a bit with its interpretation of the Upper Junon section, acting as one of the more lighthearted moments of the story. Upper Junon saw Cloud and company disguise themselves as Shinra soldiers so they can sneak their way over to Costa del Sol. It was a stark contrast from the town you were just in. In Upper Junon, everyone's happy. The streets are littered with shopping centers, and conveniently enough, you've arrived to celebrate the newly elected president of Shinra. If the lower part of Junon offers a moment to reflect on everyone else Shinra's grasp reaches, then the upper portion offers a moment to celebrate Shinra's achievement. It's ironic. To continue the journey, we have to celebrate the very antagonist that caused Sephiroth's rampage in the first place. I have no better showcase for this than the Shinra Parade March. The Honeybee rhythm game sees its glorious return, and man, is it right at home here. Looking at Cloud move around makes you realize, this is it. This is what the industry's been striving towards. The animations from 1997 are charming in their own right, but watching Cloud break it down just evokes this sense of achievement. If remaking Final Fantasy VII was on the agenda, setting a new standard in terms of presentation was definitely high on the priority list. I can't even complain about how long this takes. I was more than happy to make my way to each checkpoint just so I could see these characters do something. And this philosophy extends to the boat sequence. In the original, this was nothing more than a set piece you'd get through on your way to Costa del Sol. There were some important developments to the narrative, sure, but the location itself wasn't too important. That is no longer the case, as the boat sequence offers one of the most unique events in the game. Unlike the Shinra Parade, however, I don't much care for this one. It's just a tournament of the new card game Rebirth introduces, Queen's Blood. Without diving too deep into it, I actually really enjoy Queen's Blood. No question the best minigame added here. It's basically Marvel Snap with a lot more going on. 3 lanes with undefined territories for you to fill your cards with. While the goal is simple, how you achieve it can get very complicated. I was very surprised to see myself turn to cards with less abilities because they offered a better territory advantage when I played it. At its best, it offers quite a refreshing distraction from the main campaign. So much so that when you see a new QB marker on your map, you might put everything else aside for a quick game of cards. That's the entire point though. Queen's Blood excels as something you can do if you're so inclined amongst a sea of content. Making that mandatory takes the appeal away from it while also highlighting its flaws. For one, the opponent AI in QB isn't really all there at this point in the game, so you won't even be treated to challenging matches as you advance through the tournament. Second, I feel like this time could have been put to better use. I'm usually not one that prefers cutscenes over gameplay, but in this instance, I think it would work better here. You do have moments where you can interact with the rest of the team, but that's secondary to the QB tournament, so any moment is related to that and not the actual plot. I have to ask, is Queen's Blood really worthy of such a highlight? I understand implementing it here gives you something to do while you sail over to the resort, but that's as far as it goes. Something for you to do while you wait for the game to tell you it's time to get back to the story. Rebirth had the opportunity to make this sequence iconic in its own right, and while what we have here isn't anything worth groaning over, it feels like an opportunity missed. Coming right off the back of the Shinra March, another extended sequence to relax wasn't what the game needed, which brings me to another change made to a scene that was iconic, a change that really irks me. In the original, Sephiroth would descend down as the ship neared its destination. This was one of the few appearances he made in Disc 1, and what made this scene so unique was how little he divulged to Cloud and the team. Cloud is trying one last time to reach the hero he always admired, only for Sephiroth to respond with odd foreshadowing phrases. Sephiroth doesn't even need to say anything coherent because him being there is enough. He has presence, and that's all the player needs to understand how much of a badass he is. Quite literally, you had no idea the extent of what he had planned. It was effective. But nah, I can't have that now. Gotta have Sephiroth spell it out for everybody. And they call her Jenova! What are we doing here? Did name dropping Jenova again make this scene better in any way? Like, this was more Cloud's moment anyways, where he actually expresses a lot of emotion towards someone he used to look up to. The fuck does he say now?
Sephiroth?
Yeah, no shit, dumbass. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I find that Rebirth's interpretation here treats the player like an idiot. Like they couldn't infer anything from Sephiroth's original messaging. We just have to let the player know what's going on. Give them something to focus on. Everything that made this moment so special is now gone. The shock of watching Sephiroth descend down, the surprise boss fight, and the intent behind it in the first place. All of it is now just a shadow of itself. While it does serve its intended purpose of having Pretty Winged Angel here throw off the player from their intended objective, the intrigue behind it is completely absent. I should be wondering what Sephiroth meant when he said, "The time is now," not why he's revealing all his motives to me. Well, we don't have time to worry about that because it looks like we finally arrived at our destination. Let's get on with it then. Welcome to Costa del Sol. Whether it's your boss haggling you at work or the daily stresses that life brings, come to Costa del Sol where all your troubles will fade away. Come to the beach where you'll catch the finest looking sunset this side of Midgar. Fancy your chances in some competition? Well, have your pet run wild in all sorts of different games, all while traveling in style in our new wheelies. Why walk around when you can wheel around? Costa del Sol, your paradise away from paradise. Come on by. Okay, so this is kinda weird. Originally, Costa del Sol was literally nothing more than a pit stop in the original. You'd come here for like a single cutscene and then be on your way. Sure, you could explore a little, but this place wasn't like Walmart. It was a resort, and in a video game, doing the whole vacation thing is very limiting from a gameplay sense. But now Costa del Sol has been turned into this entire amusement park that I would say rivals the Walmart portion in Remake. I wouldn't say it ever gets that outrageous, but there's a whole smorgasbord worth of content to explore now. I'd normally be adverse to shit like this, but I think my beach setting bias is showing because I absolutely love Rebirth's interpretation on the resort spot that started it all. I don't know, I just have this affection towards a good vacation setting. I don't even really like the beach that much myself, but there's something Square is able to capture that I can't help but admire. I don't care for a lot of it, but I can't help but appreciate the insane visuals on display. It's like Golden Keys from FF15. That used to be my favorite location in a video game, but this might just overtake it. What is it with these bad Final Fantasy games looking absolutely gorgeous? The story has been expanded and we'll get to that, but if you know me, you'll know that I love to give credit when it's due. And in these isolated moments, Rebirth is a shining example at capturing the essence of what this series has the potential of showcasing. You even get these cute little outfits to wear exclusively around COREL. I'm sure shirtless Cloud is bound to tickle the fancy of a few people. And if I'm a broken record, I should go and see Tifa and Aerith because they can fix me! So yeah, it's not a problem for me. I'm okay going through all this shit, but like, does everybody absolutely need to mess with this nonsense? It's fun like one time around, but when the game is asking you to do all this shit multiple times, it just becomes annoying. Similar to Queen's Blood, these are things you should want to engage with to get out of the repetitiveness of the core gameplay loop. But when they're forced on you in this fashion, it becomes less enticing to engage with. I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest if someone told me this is where they drop Rebirth. Imagine you've engaged with everything you've seen so far and you get here, this slow, admittedly relaxing portion of the game that does have its worth, but again, kinda just want to get to the part where I can start swinging my sword again. Don't really think the Final Fantasy VII experience gained anything from skeet shooting, just saying. Getting back on track, it's time we met up with Hojo. When you met up with Hojo here in the original, the topic of conversation was, of course, who killed President Shinra, with both characters leaning to a certain silver-haired someone. Here in Rebirth? Nah, can't have that quick convo and get on with our day. Gotta make it this whole incident where Hojo has to get back at Cloud and Aerith for ending his schemes back in Midgar. Dude's supposed to be on vacation, but he's so unhinged that he even attempts to kidnap Aerith again. Like, come on, man, we moved on from that. Just get over it. Yeah, this boss fight is fun, I guess, but why? I still have an entire region to explore. Plenty of Chadley requests to get to. Want to make your point here, Hojo?
Let him go. We've done enough.
Oh, we're just gonna move on then? Well then what the fuck was the point of the boss fight? What was the point of any of this? And, the fucking padding, man. It's just too much for me. Like most of the game, Rebirth decides the original didn't have enough mandatory shovelware to get through, so it goes on a bender and makes the pathway to Barrett's house its own extravaganza. Filled with Shinra cameos, all new boss fights like the custom Valkyrie, and an elongated minecart section. Oh, and that's not even getting into this brilliant addition Rebirth makes where back in Midgar, Zack and Elmyra are carrying both Cloud and Aerith back to Sector 5. Wait, but I thought Cloud and Aerith were over here, so why are they? And isn't Zack supposed to be? Nah, fuck it. My head's gone. My head is gone! Because what the absolute fuck is going on? In what feels like a blink of an eye, I went from almost falling asleep engaging with all the extra stuff on my way to Barrett's hometown to waking right the fuck up when the screen went black and I saw Zack's ugly mug. It's points like these where my befuddlement gets the best of me. This better be worth it in the long run because these intrusions are not welcome. So you get through all that, make your way to Barrett's hometown finally, and I once again have to credit Rebirth's presentation because watching Barrett reveal his origins was just about exactly what I needed. You had me going there, had me thinking you'd ruin one of my favorite parts of the original. Barrett's backstory was always one that resonated well with me. This feeling of having everything on your shoulders, having to make big decisions for yourself and for others, and having only a friend to help take the load off those shoulders. It's one of the reasons Barrett became one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy VII. I'm very happy to say that Rebirth captures this moment. The first real-time Barrett opens up about himself perfectly. Genuinely can't imagine this being constructed any better. Major kudos. Shit like this is really all I wanted. Expanding in the literal sense. Take this scene here and present it in a way that fits modern day standards. That's it. And this sentiment can be shared on our next stop as well. A place a lot of people have been waiting to see with modern graphics. That's right, it's the Gold Saucer. Gotta be honest here, guys, I don't really have much in the way of commentary for the Gold Saucer. Besides all the Rebirth stuff you'd expect, the Gold Saucer is pretty much one for one, and I never thought it was that fun to begin with. Yes, it's very pretty. Dio and especially Kate Sith have seen transformative glow-ups of their own, but unfortunately, I think I'm starting to feel numb to the eye candy at this point. I understand, truly I do, but after all the extra content in Costa del Sol, the novelty of the Gold Saucer is kinda lost now. This was supposed to be where you took a moment to slow down and enjoy a few side activities, but half the game has already been that, so the importance of the Gold Saucer is kind of diluted. I enjoy walking around exploring the saucer with Tifa, but now you're asking me to engage with the content not only in the overworld, not only at the resort, but here too? No thanks, I got stuff to do. That's all I really gotta say. Pretty much everything that plays out in the original is untouched here. Oh wait, sorry, that's almost untouched. Can't forget the mandatory Sephiroth cameo and the Zack Okay, no more dodging this one. In the grand scheme of the entire Final Fantasy VII series, Zack is a very important character. I fully understand and even agree with that. But in the confines of the original Final Fantasy VII, Zack's involvement was very minor. He played an important part to characters like Aerith and especially Cloud, but he wasn't this annoying guy showing up to disrupt the story like his Rebirth counterpart does. So you could actually buy into him as a mysterious figure. And again, 20-plus-year-old spoiler coming up, but Zack fucking dies! So all of this nonsense cannot simply add to what he meant before. In a sense, there's a bit of charm to Zack being alive in this alternate scenario that's separate from the main campaign, but at the end of the day, having him show up this frequently robs him of one of his most important qualities, his presence. Zack's presence in the original was always very unique. He didn't show up very often, but he always left an impact that sort of had a ripple effect throughout the rest of the story. Zack never became this legendary character because he survived his final stand. He became legendary because he didn't. How can a character like Zack have the same impact he had in 1997 if the moment that immortalized him is now just gone, replaced with a guy who just looks fucking lost? Maybe if Zack had some sort of clear goal, I would be a bit more receptive to what is probably the most egregious change made so far in this trilogy. But he's just here hanging out with Marlene like it's no big thing. It should be obvious that this is building to something, but it doesn't even feel like it. I just feel like it's all an excuse to hang out with a reanimated corpse. Reminder, that's with knowledge of who he is, which is what the game clearly expects you to have, while also sort of introducing you to him. It's whack. Also, quick tangent buffer, but I discovered something while I was playing Rebirth and I feel compelled to share. Fuck cactuars! I had to fight some for some stupid optional quest I was doing, and I'm pretty sure a majority of my deaths in my playthrough came from these 4 cactuars. No joke, I get that killing you in like 2 hits is kinda their thing, but seriously? Just can't let me have anything, can you, Rebirth?
Well, figures it would end like this.
Okay, when it comes to the glow-ups I mentioned earlier, I'd argue nobody has it greater than Barrett Wallace. In a game where there's like 7 to 8 main characters in your arsenal, admittedly some could get lost in the shuffle. However, Barrett was always one that constantly stood out. So like most things, when it comes to bringing stuff like Barrett's backstory into the modern day, I was really excited, and for a majority of it, I really loved how Rebirth interprets this part of the original. Shit, I'd go as far as to say I prefer him in the remakes. At this point, Barrett opens up about his life in COREL before moving to Midgar, how he was a minor, how he was married, and of course how close he was to his friend Dyne. While they managed, Barrett always had aspirations for a better life, a life where he wouldn't have to worry about something as trivial as guilt. So when Shinra shows up and offers a better life to both Barrett and Dyne, Barrett obviously feels conflicted on what he should do. The resources Shinra offers would no doubt improve the town, but their presence isn't exactly ideal. Inevitably, he decides to allow Shinra to build the reactor they so desire. This decision, of course, ends up being the catalyst for the destruction of Barrett and Dyne's hometown, the loss of all their friends and family, and their inevitable separation. The event clearly weighs heavily on Barrett's mind. Look no further than Barrett adopting Dyne's only daughter, Marlene. She is a constant reminder that Barrett failed his best friend. So when it's announced there's another guy out there toting his gun for an arm around, Barrett can only think of one person. The reunion of Barrett and Dyne in the original Final Fantasy VII, I'd argue, is the first moment where things got real. This story and these characters are more than just saving the planet. They have real problems and issues that they need to overcome before they can devote themselves to the cause. Everything you thought of Barrett leading up before this was entirely different. Sure, he had a soft side, but he was always the tough guy, the character everyone looked to as a symbol of strength besides Cloud. To see him break down in this way almost felt uncomfortable. Like, holy shit, even this guy can get vexed? Wow, things must be serious. By this point, Dyne is on a little redemption tour. He wants to get revenge against Shinra after losing his wife and child, and will stop at nothing to get what he wants. And for as much as Barrett tries, Dyne just won't stand for reason. Even after hearing Marlene is alive and well in Midgar, just waiting to meet her real daddy, it isn't enough for Dyne to realize all the destruction he's caused. And he eventually realizes the best course of action he can make is to atone for all the crimes he's committed. The boss fight with Dyne was really nothing special, but that moment will forever be immortalized for the conversation they share, and the impact it would leave on Barrett. In moments, Rebirth does capture this, but wow, does it absolutely kill the entire mood with this wacky, insane take on Dyne. First off, the boss fight. Whoa. Like I said, this was never the important part about this moment. So naturally, Rebirth says fuck that, because now the fight with Dyne is turned into this elaborate spectacle with cutscenes that interrupt your flowing combat and everything. And forgive me for showing my age here, but I really don't think Dyne needed to transform into this anime shonen character to hammer home the point. Like, seriously? Why can Dyne just summon these tentacles like this? Sheesh, dude must be smoking that funny Mako if you catch my drift. The battle is fun enough on its own, I guess. Rebirth definitely isn't lacking in spectacle, that's for sure. But what was once this emotional, gut-wrenching battle has turned into this extravagant set piece where we fight Jared Leto's Dyne. Yeah, I think whoever was specifically in charge of this scene might have missed the original point of the character. Dyne never turned into this psychotic, literal insane person after the events of Mount COREL. He didn't lose his mind. It was destroyed. The massacre at the Gold Saucer confirms it. Him shooting his gun as you approached him was a way of conveying that after everything he's done, Dyne is out of options. Some of the line delivery here was truly breathtaking, and watching Barrett slowly come to terms that his best friend is long gone nearly broke me. But fuck it, dude, I think I can do without Dyne saying Barrett's oh so famous quote.
You? Here to help me? He's here for you. To take the load off your shoulders, right?
Oh, he said it! He said the thing! And similar to the rest of the game, Rebirth just can't restrain itself even a little. See, in the original, after beating Dyne, he would go on a spiel on how he can't face Marlene after all he's done and his true desire is to reunite with his wife Eleanor. He says his piece and then just yeets himself off the mountain. And once that was done, you had a moment to kind of take it in. Really let Dyne's death weigh on you before continuing your adventure. It was very simple, but more importantly, it was effective. Things from this point going forward were never going to be the same. Rebirth, on the other hand, says phooey to that because now Shinra is here to make sure Cloud and the team can't escape. Can't have this heartbreaking emotional moment anymore, I guess. Gotta have this whole battle that involves everyone, stealing the spotlight away from what really matters. Yeah, that seems about right. And it just won't stop there. Now is where we have the infamous Palmer boss fight, fully equipped with a giant mech to take us on. The improved boss fight is appreciated, but fuck, why did it need to happen right now? Barrett's fucking sulking and we're off playing the hero? And maybe it's just hitting me now, but don't we fight Palmer way later in the original? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember fighting him in Rocket Town when Cloud and the team needed to recruit Sid. So, what gives? Fighting Palmer now only ruins the intent of what the original was trying to capture. There is nothing added in its place except more action movie tofu. Moments like these are core to Final Fantasy VII's identity, but now it feels like a carnival with all these hyperactive events going on, including a gunslinging shoot-em-up section where you need to use Dio's buggy to escape from Shinra. This is the fucking problem with Rebirth. It's not enough to have cutscenes that completely butcher the intent and meaning behind what it's updating, but now even when things happen is a gamble. Yeah, they said they might reorder things in pre-release, but this? Palmer in the dying death scene? If integrating Shinra into this scene was absolutely necessary, fine. But was this really the best you could come up with? Man, I always loved the scene where Cloud and the team were on their way to GONGAGA and stumbled upon Rude and Reno chatting about the girls they liked. I don't know, it wasn't really important in the grand scheme of things since we still throw hands in the original, but it was a cute little moment that added a lot of characterization to characters that otherwise wouldn't get a second glance. But here, they've all just regressed to their surface level tropes. Like, no joke, only Elena has any personality out of the Turks now. These could be regular foot soldiers, honestly. Look, Rude, if you're not gonna try, why are you even here? Well, it's a shame Barrett's defining moment has pretty much been ruined. Can't take any of this seriously anymore. Too much MCU level storytelling for my liking. Also, I forgot, since we already saved Aerith and the rest of the team from Gus, something you did after Dyne passed away in the original, that leaves room for Rebirth to introduce even new content to the story. And boy, it doesn't hold back. We pan to this really short scene of Rufus chatting with Sung, only for this strange man, dressed like a Whisper of Fate named Glenn, to interrupt them. Yeah, go play Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, The First Soldier, to learn more about this guy. I'm sorry, but no. Asking me to play Final Fantasy VII over multiple parts, asking me to play the original itself, fuck, even asking me to play the remake of fucking Crisis Core. I'm down for all that. But asking me to play a mobile spin-off gacha game with these brand new characters, that is where I draw the line. I'm not doing this. You can't expect people playing the game to do this. It's one thing to lock story content behind other games, but tying in brand new content from a mobile spin-off is just bullshit. Fuck you, Glenn. I don't even know who you are and I don't care. Just fuck you. Yeah, that felt good. So I guess at this point in the original, we'd make our way over to Gongaga to meet up with Reno and Rude. But hey, wouldn't it be funny if Zack showed up and... Yeah, I see you coming, asshole. See, it's about now where Zack is actually forced to do something in Midgar, and that's to find Biggs for Marlene. Remember how in Remake, the camera pans to Biggs waking up in a hospital bed after the Sector 7 plane crash, an event he originally died in? Yup, toss that up to the old Whispers of Fate saving Biggs for unexplained reasons. And now that a bit of time has passed, it's up to Zack to go and ask random strangers if they've seen someone matching Biggs' description. And you perform this mundane task at an excruciating pace. Just a bit faster. Come on! Whatever, man. If I make it this huge point to stop for every one of these, we'll be here literally all day. Let's move on.
Fancy popping in? The reactor's not going anywhere, and I bet we could all do with a wee cat nap, eh?
Sure, let's.
Cloud? You okay?
I feel like I've been here before.
Oh my god, Gongaga. This is it, fellas. This is the place. No doubt about it. Gongaga is where the game truly goes off the rails, or in this instance, back on them. So far, exploring the overworlds and doing Chadley's requests have been pretty painless. It isn't always fun, but the worlds were open enough where the traversal itself was enjoyable enough. Toss all that shit out of the window because holy shit, I can't even begin to start wondering what they were thinking here. Gongaga is easily the worst area in the entire game. Not just that, this place is ass. Bottom of the pile, booty cheeks, ass, bro. So in each region, you can find a chocobo that helps you traverse the area, right? Makes sense. And what's cool is each chocobo has their own unique ability. Swimming through swampy water, climbing walls, things like that. The chocobo's special ability here in Gongaga is jumping over these mushrooms to reach higher places. Now, I have no problem with that. It's not really engaging in a gameplay sense, but it's the least of Rebirth's padding concerns. If the level design itself is constructed well, I have no problem interacting with these small moments of spectacle. Too bad it's not! This place is nauseating to go through. Gone are the open areas you've been exploring. Now we're back to that remake claustrophobia I mentioned earlier. Things are just so packed in now, it actually gets to the point where the frame rate tanks. The entire game has been running near buttery smooth the entire time, but with all these assets on screen and the speed of the combat, don't be surprised if your PlayStation 5 starts to overheat. And because things are now more condensed, that means the traversal isn't wider, it's longer. Why else would we be using these fucking chocobo jump pads? It would have been one thing if we needed to get through one jump pad to reach the next portion of the level, but sometimes you need to do this like 3 to 4 times before you can get anywhere. And God forbid you take the wrong route unintentionally. Gongaga ends up feeling like this maze when it really didn't have to. This Metroidvania-esque design even goes so far as to bog down the open form movement I praised earlier. Great, now I really have nothing to enjoy. I understand these are all things that just need to happen so the game has stuff for you to do, but it then begs the question. If moving around in these gorgeous landscapes isn't enjoyable, why should I go out of my way to do it then? I mean, I'm gonna do it anyway since I'm making a video on it, but think about that. I don't think that's a thought that should enter my mind when engaging with the content at a level the game so desperately wants me to. You'd think we'd stick with the winning formula that worked pretty well in the first 2 areas, but nah, gotta toss that all out of the window for the jungle aesthetic, I suppose. Man, this sucks. I can't even enjoy the fucking visuals here, the performance isn't helping, and I'm constantly frustrated because I feel like I've passed this specific tree like 4 times. Getting lost in a game is all well and good. There's merit to using context clues as your means of navigation, but when the game has been holding my hand with these yellow paint signs all over the climbing sections, I don't think I was quite prepared to be left on my own like this. What else do I need to say really? Gongaga was legitimately unimportant in the original game, but now that Rebirth is incorporating every piece of Final Fantasy VII material, it has turned into this all-important place now. It was pretty cool how you could interact with Zack's parents in the original Gongaga, and that moment is brilliantly recreated here. But does this one-off moment justify building this huge landscape? And by this point, it's not even subtle. Oh, you thought it was bad before. The shitty changes and references were tame in comparison to what we're dealing with now. Yeah, Cisne, the oft-forgotten Turk, is here, as I can only assume she's the leader of Gongaga? Confused as to why she's here? Go play Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion to find out how she ended up here. I'm not even kidding. Tetsuya Nomura literally made playing this 10-hour PSP game mandatory. From knowing the origins and memes of Best Boy Zack to understanding who this side character is. Well, I guess that confirms it then. Final Fantasy VII has officially been Kingdom Heartsified. What was once an original, iconic game has now been turned into this multi-part series combined with spin-offs that contain mandatory lore that you need to know before going into the games you actually want to play. It's like deja vu. You'd think Square would have learned after the mishaps this structure caused in arguably Square's most lucrative IP to let it happen to the series that made them so legendary in the first place? It feels wrong. Or not. I mean, hey, they make money. God, and that's not even going into all the changes made to GONGAGA specifically. So originally you'd come here so you could run into Scarlet in the reactor. Want to hear something funny though? I never went to the reactor in GONGAGA. I have no reason for this either. I just straight up forgot. That's what I mean when I say it was optional. The game wouldn't stop just because you forgot to get a summon materia or two. Things kept moving, and if you wanted to experience said content, you'd have to go out of your way to find it. But now, the GONGAGA reactor is now this clusterfuck of padding and fan service. Sephiroth appearance? Check. Long sequences of walking around slowly to proceed? Check. Mandatory boss fight with Scarlet that's a direct reference to Yuffie's beef with her in intermission? Oh baby, double check. Look, I won't deny, some of these moments are great. Watching Cloud mow down these Shinra troops and turn into Neo when he dodges these bullets? Ka-chow, yeah. But this doesn't add to the story. I know exactly what seeds are being planted here, and I gotta ask, why are we even here in the first place? So Yuffie can get her hands on some rare materia to stop Scarlet from furthering Shinra's power even more? I have no idea why we're here other than to have these characters do things to fill out the runtime. Isn't it really shocking that I haven't mentioned Tifa yet in almost any capacity? Well, that's because she's offered nothing to the main plot other than just being here. But now in this new and shiny version of GONGAGA, she has seen her role expanded. Throughout Sephiroth's many unwanted interruptions, something he constantly does is try and convince Cloud that the Tifa he's with right now is not the real Tifa from the NIBELHEIM flashback. Sure, makes sense. At this point, Cloud and Tifa still have differing memories of the incident. But in GONGAGA, Sephiroth takes this to the literal extreme where he has Cloud do this.
But I'm no fool.
Wow. I mean, there you have it. If you ever needed one clip as to why Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just vexes me to the core of my being, this is the one. My mind was all over the place watching this unfold. Cloud slashing Tifa only for her to get eaten by a fucking whale? I couldn't make sense of any of it. And if that wasn't enough, the mindfuck keeps going. It's here where Tifa goes on this little tour of some of her memories. Up until this point, Cloud's relationship with Tifa has been kinda icy. They've had this will they won't they thing going on the entire game. Plus, he didn't do himself any favors by doubting the legitimacy of Tifa's trauma at the beginning. But this is just out of left field. Other than Sephiroth seductively whispering, "She ain't the one, Brody." Nothing else present with Tifa ever alludes to this character shift. And I might just be reading into things a bit here, but isn't it a coincidence that this was one of the key shots in the trailers? Oh, here we are in the illustrious GONGAGA reactor where we just have to create an iconic moment that players will remember for years to come. Buy your ticket to watch the Tifa memory show. It's a wonderful world after all. And hey, if you thought Sephiroth controlling Cloud while he slashes a Tifa was bad, prepare to have your jaw drop because he goes after Tifa again! Huh? Dog, you fucked up the first time. Maybe try a different approach. This is now the third time you've tried killing Tifa, and you continue to fail miserably. Not even the whispers of fate can help you take her out. I would say this pisses me off, but I don't think I can because I'm still processing everything that happened as I type the script. We have story stuff from DLC in an entirely different game to focus on, which then shifts us to Sephiroth targeting Tifa for some reason, only to go on some spiritual quest where Tifa relives memories of her and Cloud when they were children? Have I got all that right? Sephiroth targeting Tifa just makes no sense. Obviously, this is something he never did in the original, let alone at this point in the game. This obviously points to the fact that Sephiroth may have an idea or even full knowledge of the events that play out in the 1997 story. So one could argue that Sephiroth needs to change what he does to ensure his victory, but I'm not really sure what the goal here is other than general dickery. Will the death of a different girl change the timeline in his favor? Maybe it's answered later, but it seems like random shock value right now for trailers. And like I said earlier, Rebirth goes out of its its way to focus on Tifa and Cloud's relationship. You see what I'm getting at? Sephiroth didn't learn his lesson. If he knows what happens in the end, why would he go and make the same mistake again? Obviously, Aerith is the last ancient, and she's a lot more involved in the lore of Final Fantasy VII, but to Cloud, that never mattered. It was because of who Aerith was as a person that made her loss so devastating. At this point in Rebirth, you can make that same case. Slashing Tifa aside, the spotlight has been thrust right onto these two characters. So had Sephiroth succeeded in killing Tifa, who's to say Cloud wouldn't be spurred on in that moment to murder Sephiroth? For those familiar with the original story of FF7, this is nothing but bait to have your mind focus elsewhere for what you know is inevitably coming. I won't deny it, during Rebirth's marketing run, I totally thought they were going to kill off Tifa. I thought it made total sense for what this trilogy was going for. The unknown journey will continue teaser from the end of Remake combined with the focus on these two characters, yeah, had me on the hook. I was convinced Sephiroth was going to get away with it too. And for those who are playing these games without knowledge of the original, genuinely have no clue what you must be thinking, because I can barely make anything out of it. It's a shame too, because Tifa was always a character I really enjoyed. I wouldn't say she left the biggest impression in the original, but I always found her to be quite a charming addition to the team. I think I just have a thing for a character who's just really nice all the time, but can turn into an absolute savage on a dime. She never needed to dominate the screen like Aerith, because when she did make an appearance, it was always memorable. So as you can imagine, when it comes to Rebirth's interpretation of Tifa, sorry to say, but she just ain't it. Look, I understand. Now that everyone is voice acted, we have to make sure everyone gets their time in the sun. But there is such a thing as being subtle. There is a way of incorporating these characters without making it feel like it's all about them. It rarely feels like we're a team outside of gameplay because we have all these individual storylines to interweave into our main objective, and that's stopping Sephiroth. But hey, if you enjoyed the Yuffie and Scarlet cage match, followed by the near skewering of Tifa, great, more power to you. I, however, can't really get into it. Wouldn't say my immersion was shattered, but the unnecessary filler was a bit too much for me. Kinda just preferred when this was optional, to be honest.
Where to, folks?
Cosmo Canyon, please.
You talk? The hell kind of magic trick is this?
Nah, sorry, where am I? Wait, Sid? Why are you here? We're not supposed to find you yet. Okay, well, Sid is here in Gongaga to kickstart his airline business. So you guessed it, we'll be traveling to Cosmo Canyon in style, via the tiny Bronco. It could be worse, I suppose. I mean, as long as traversing this place isn't anything like Gongaga. Come on, just gotta, yeah, no. You know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to play something that's actually good and is fun. I mean, what else is there to say, really? After the mess that was Gongaga, I really don't have it in me. It has everything you'd expect, including the worst minigame I've ever fucking played. Whoever designed the controls for this stupid flying nonsense, I better not run into you on a dark night because sweet lord help me. I really am only harming my own mental well-being by doing these. But this is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Forgive my curious mind for wanting to see how far they'd go. And honestly, I have no interest in discussing it any further. Fuck this place, fuck Cosmo Canyon, and especially double V sign fuck you to Shani. Oh, little baby gonna cry. She fell off her butt. Oh, poor baby. Come on, Shani. You know the saying. Get back on the horse, right? Well, get back on the bird. Seriously, just get over it. Now, it's at this point in the story where things would slow down and we take a bit of time to focus on one of the more overlooked characters, Red 13. Up until now, Red has been kind of a mystery. He's kept to himself most of the time, and to be frank, he hasn't really had much to do. So getting to Cosmo Canyon was always exciting because it meant learning about another member of the team. And sure, things are a bit more padded out, but I have to admit, this is almost masterfully recreated. Finally, something that's actually being adapted here, and tying it all together is the masterful performance of Bugenhagen. This guy is such a joy every time he's on screen. He brings a level of energy we've surely been missing, showcased perfectly by his pitch-perfect narration while educating Cloud and his friends on the biology of the planet. And speaking of that, it would be remiss of me not to mention the absolutely stunning visuals on display. It's been a while and I kinda want to be nice for a second. Watching footage back of this scene here has me struggling to believe we're playing just a video game. It is mind-blowing. I don't say that very often, but it's true. My eyeballs are being fondled in ways I never thought possible. In a game littered with needless bullshit at almost every corner, I was relieved to see something that went untouched for the most part. Not really a moment that I was in love with, but at the rate we're going at, I'll take anything. Now it ain't perfect. This is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth after all. You know how it goes by this point. For as well as Cosmo Canyon has been interpreted, it isn't without its flaws. Like Nanaki's challenge. At this point, he finally opens up about himself and his family a little. According to him, when his hometown was invaded by the Gi, Nanaki's mother fought honorably while his father, Seto, ran away like a coward. It wasn't until you completed Nanaki's quest where you learned it was actually Seto who sacrificed himself to save the townsfolk. Seto knew if Nanaki knew the truth about his demise, he'd go seeking revenge, so a white lie was created so Nanaki wouldn't meet the same fate. It was a cute, emotional moment that didn't overshadow the importance of what was being conveyed. Too bad Rebirth had to make the journey to this moment an absolute slog. I understand part of Nanaki's challenge was the path to Seto himself, but geez, now it's this section filled with mandatory climbing sections and simple yet slow puzzles to solve. Can't really enjoy the moments of growth Nanaki has when I'm doing something that sucks immediately after. And this is a nitpick, not really a big deal, but I hate how you can't choose which party member to bring with you. Now Barrett has to be the one that accompanies Nanaki and Bugenhagen. Yes, only Barrett this time. Why? I mean, I get that they kinda have this playful beef between them, but I don't know, I kinda wanted to bring Yuffie like I did in the original. And what, no Cloud either? I don't know, it feels weird. Anytime you're out exploring the planet, you're constantly encouraged to mix and match your team. And in the original, story moments like this weren't too restricted in terms of customization. But I can only chalk this up to the game needing to look this good for the lack of customization. If all the time is spent making sure these characters and environments all look and sound great, then there isn't much time to implement every single character. Could have saved some resources here and there and not made this cave sequence that takes like 40 minutes, but whatever. At least the Ginatok boss fight is pretty good. Not a huge fan of playing as either of these characters, but there's just so much shit going on, I can't help but enjoy the ride. And thankfully, Rebirth is able to capture Nanaki's resolve when he learns the truth of what really happened to his father. Was worried they were going to find some way to butcher this, but luckily my worries were quelled pretty quickly. It was recreated beautifully. I even appreciate Bugenhagen telling Nanaki to leave now as opposed to the little scare we got back in the original. Kinda makes it feel like Nanaki has a much more important role in the team now. Got nothing else to add here. It was a near identical recreation from the original. Guess we should move on to NIBELHEIM. What the?
Hearken unto me. My name is Ginatok.
Well, guess things can't be so simple anymore. Here's another one of those changes Rebirth decides to add where we introduce a remnant of the Gi, the opposition of Bugenhagen and his people. Ginatok here takes us on this spiritual quest or something, so he can explain the position of his people. And,
You and me both.
I feel like segments like this were implemented to have you spend more time with these characters, give you more time to flesh out this team. But sorry, that can't exactly happen when my attention is solely focused on trying to figure out what the hell is happening. It's not even because this is just new content. If this were in any Final Fantasy, I'd probably question it. What do the Gi add that we don't already have in one of the many other antagonists present in Rebirth? And gee, isn't it quite a coincidence that Yuffie, again, an optional character from the original, has easily the biggest presence here? I get why she needs to be forced in, but this isn't really enhancing the story or redefining what it could be. This just feels like nonsense, just so we can get to the part where Sephiroth shows up. Yeah, there he is. If it wasn't obvious, this clusterfuck of a cutscene was added so we can add all new lore to the black materia. Because the subtlety of a materia being the color black wasn't ominous enough. Gotta tie it to the gi so all the Timmies and Tammies can get scared right out of their boots. I hate to be the guy that complains about the show don't tell technique, but isn't this just a tad much? I think we could have done without the Gi Vision Quest to introduce new lore to the black materia, because I can guarantee you after this, we'll never see these motherfuckers ever again.
You okay?
Yeah.
Looks like we're not the only ones headed for Nibelheim.
You might be expecting me to go on some rant as to how much I hate the Nibelheim open area and how it's this miserable experience. Can't really blame you after the last few sections. But in a shocking twist, I'm happy to say that although expanded for no discernible reason, Nibelheim wasn't too bad actually. Finally, someone showed some restraint because the Nibelheim region is without question the smallest biome in the game. Dare I say, going for 100% here was even manageable? Still has all the Rebirth bullshit you'd expect, but when things are essentially next to each other, I can't really complain. Plus, the Chocobo exclusive to this region has quite possibly the stupidest yet funniest ability I have ever seen in any Final Fantasy ever. Just hop aboard your Chocobo, hit R2, and... Listen, alright, this is dumb. By all laws of physics, this shouldn't even be possible, but this is the exact type of off-the-cuff shit I want to see in my Final Fantasy games. Show me things I can't see in any other franchise. Make me experience things I can only get in this series. That's what it's all about. I'm still team, we can do without all this, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy myself here. And isn't that fitting? The last biome in the game, Cloud and Tifa's home, and the final stop before the adventure really ramps up. Yeah, definitely fitting for the main gameplay loop to come to a close with this. I think Nibelheim might be my favorite area in the game. Doesn't have the same wow factor we started off with, but I actually had a lot of fun. Probably due to this being near the end of the game and all the optional content reaching its apex. Still wouldn't say we reached the peaks we did last year in Final Fantasy XVI, but even still, I was quite overwhelmed with some of the optional combat encounters. I even had to retry a couple, and I was more than happy to. Man, it's been such a long time too. I feel like all I've been doing is dumping on Rebirth. And really, that's not my intent. I'm sure you must be asking, well, if you don't like the game, why go on and finish it? And I think that's totally fair. Why would I want to talk about a game that I clearly haven't been enjoying? Well, I mean, there's a point to it all really. If I absolutely hated Rebirth, of course I wouldn't finish it. I didn't really care for Remake either, but that's the thing. I don't hate Rebirth. It's such a strong word. Hate, that is. And frankly, it's just untrue. When Rebirth is doing what I think it should as an adaptation, I find myself preferring it over the original in many ways. And it's quality of life fixes like this, on top of all the other positive things I've mentioned that really make this topic so enticing. But I'm just one person. Of course, a conglomerate like SquareEnix isn't going to tailor their latest and greatest in their legacy IP to my needs. I'm not foolish enough to think that. Though, I would have been happy to meet in the middle here. As is, the way it's been feels like a constant tug of war. There's some stuff I really enjoy and would love to come back to one day. But on the flip side, there's just as much, if not more shit I can't stand. For as brilliant as some of the moments are, that's all they really amount to. Moments. The game can't consistently achieve the high you'd expect with the title Final Fantasy VII Rebirth when it's filled with things like Moogle herding or chocobo wrestling, you know? During the making of this video, a 90-minute discussion with some of the minds behind Rebirth released documenting the mindset behind crafting some of these iconic locations. Something that stuck out to me was this quote from one of the game's directors, Motomo Toriyama.
旅の楽しい雰囲気というのを味わえるようにしていますね。
エンタメ性を足してるっていう言葉ありますもんね、あそこは。みんなも。見た目的にも楽しくなってるし。
そうですね。結構シリアスな旅だけではなくて、クラウドたちの日常の旅というか、そういうものが見えるようなエピソードを追加したりしています。
Now, I'm not trying to come for this guy's neck when he says this. It totally makes sense, especially with the context of Remake and how it expanded things to show off the less serious aspects of these characters. Make no mistake, however, this non-serious vibe the team were after extends to the gameplay, which explains why we're doing shit as silly as this. I hate to say this, but I think there was a much better way of incorporating all this. We already have places like the Gold Saucer and Costa del Sol to kick back and have fun. These biomes feel ripe with endless possibilities to introduce cool things you wouldn't see otherwise. And while that's technically true, the execution is lacking in nearly every regard. I don't feel cool doing any of this, and I'm not learning anything too interesting anyways. So what's the point besides my OCD wanting to check off that box? Nothing. There is no point, and that's honestly how I feel about the whole open world structure of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. What it really boils down to is the fact that these activities you can't interact with are nothing but filler, and only those most curious will actually go and do all this bullshit. Sorry, did I say curious? I meant stupid! It misses the point entirely. If you wanted to capture that carefree vibe, then why not emulate the original, which had pretty decent writing to convey when these characters were goofing off. And for those that say all this adds to the experience and are fun in their own right, I then ask, this is what you consider fun? Yeah, no thanks, I'm good. So at this point in the original, we'd be returning to Nibelheim to meet up with Sephiroth, who'd go on to tell us about the reunion, an event Cloud has no idea of yet. Yeah, those dudes in black cloaks mumbling reunion all the time, it was all for this moment here. Sephiroth would then tell Cloud that if he wished to stop him, he must meet him at Mount Nibel. You had no idea what Sephiroth meant, so your curiosity would be enough to get you to Mount Nibel. And normally, we would make our way over to Rocket Town so Sid could take us on north past Mount Nibel. But since we already met Sid now, we have this long sequence that forces us back to the Nibel reactor. If GONGAGA had me losing my sanity, and Cosmo Canyon had me in a void, I honestly don't even have the words to convey how awful this section is. These remakes have been putting a lot more emphasis in letting you control all the other characters besides Cloud outside of combat, and usually it was never too intrusive. Obviously it wasn't welcome, but they were harmless. How this Cait Sith section exists in this form, oh, I'll never know. I can't even begin to joke about this one. This is easily the worst part of the entire game, and I'd even go so far as to say it might be the worst anything I've ever seen. I should have seen it coming, really. Cait has kinda been off doing his own thing, hasn't really meshed with the team yet. Perfect way to showcase how hard they work to realize Cait Sith for modern audiences. But I think I've done enough mini games now where throwing boxes to break other boxes just cracks a nerve, you know? Man, I don't even know fans of Rebirth who enjoy this part. Jeez, it's like a pyramid of filler. And where does this lead, you might be wondering? Why, back to the Shinra Mansion, the reason we came here in the first place. Similar to Yuffie, we run into another optional character you could recruit in the original, Vincent Valentine. Unlike Yuffie though, this is actually where you met him in the original. However, things didn't play out so simply. In the original, you had to complete this puzzle where you had to unlock a safe and fight an optional boss. Another cool thing you can obtain by going out of your way to explore the vast world you're in. Can't have that in Rebirth. Gotta hire super famous voice actor Matt Mercer to portray the once obscure and mysterious Vincent. I don't know. On one hand, I think having Vincent become mandatory isn't inherently bad, but it kinda takes away from the excitement of his entire character. And when you consider that Vincent is the one party member here who isn't playable, it makes it even worse. That's right, fellas. We got Red 13'd again. I mean, yeah, sure, Square told us this was happening, but that doesn't make it sting any less. Considering Rebirth goes on to spoil what he's capable of before you get to play as him with this new boss fight against his Galaic form, I really wouldn't know what to think if I hadn't known who Vincent was prior to this. I guess it serves the purpose of hyping us up for the next game, but if you were going to make him mandatory and change things anyways, why not just save this for part 3 when he is playable? In the original, Vincent initially joined Cloud and the team to look for Hojo, since Hojo is responsible for the monster Vincent has become. Makes total sense. But I guess I should go play Dirge of Cerberus because now Vincent wants to join the team because he also has beef with Sephiroth. Great. I guess I should be grateful. If you could control Vincent, he probably would have been handled the same way Yuffie was, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. Whatever, it's fine. Why complain about this when I can complain about the lack of a Sephiroth appearance here? Now, you think I'd be crazy complaining that he isn't here. He's already made far too many interruptions for my liking. But this was one of the times he did show up in the original, where he tells Cloud to meet him at Mount Nibel. And no, I'm not counting his little cameo during the now mandatory Roche boss fight, though I really can't complain too much here since this ends with Roche's death. Killing off new additions added in this trilogy even though a lot of time was spent developing them is a-okay by me. But if I knew this meant we'd introduce new garbage instead, I think I would have stuck with Roche. Couldn't leave things the way they were, huh? Alright. For those unaware, the NIBELHEIM flashback from the original, and by extension the beginning of Rebirth, aren't exactly the true events of what happened 5 years ago. You wouldn't know this because by this point in the original the flashback wasn't brought up again. You just came here so Sephiroth could essentially point you to the next location on your journey. But I guess if we're expanding the entirety of this area now, adding in stuff that wasn't there originally, sure, why not? Bringing up the flashback again won't get annoying, I'm sure. Oh, jeez, Cloud. You alright there, bud? You don't look so good.
So, any friends here you want to see? Maybe a girlfriend? Speaking of which, I'll bet you're dying to hear about mine. Am I right? What? Not interested? I'm gonna tell you anyway. She's real pretty. No, beautiful. Kinda depends on the angle. She's just great to be around.
She from Midgard?
Yep, real city mouse.
Well, that's interesting. Apparently Cloud remembers Zack being at the NIBELHEIM flashback even though we clearly saw that he wasn't there previously. Okay, moseying along, still going, and... What? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. No, I'm certain this never occurred back in 1997. My initial shock almost caused me to give myself a concussion. I was absolutely floored. Now I understand. The NIBELHEIM flashback as we saw it weren't the exact events of what really went down. But Zack dying by waterfall wasn't exactly what happened either. So I find myself once again asking, what does this mean? You can't tie this into his plotline in Midgard because he fucking dies here while at the same time he's off in literally his own world doing his own thing. And how this is relevant to Cloud at this present moment, I don't know. Clearly, Rebirth is trying to build up to something, but when I can't understand what is happening when this new plotline is introduced, how am I supposed to invest myself in any of this? If you count Cloud's original recollection of events, what actually happened 5 years ago, and now this? We have 3 separate versions of the NIBELHEIM flashback. I think that's a bit much. It comes off so tacky too. It literally feels like this was forced in as a cash grab or something. Anything we can do to show Sephiroth raising his head in the flames again. I swear, Rebirth just can't resist forcing these things in to keep you awake. Maybe that's to mask how awful it is to actually climb back to the Nibel reactor. Man, such a shame. I really liked Rebirth's interpretation of NIBELHEIM too, but I think after everything I just witnessed, I don't think I want to come back here anytime soon.
Huh? Kate Sith?
Ah, Yuffie! And where might you be?
Back room off Mako storage. You?
So while Cloud was off participating in new Final Fantasy VII lore, Kate Sith was searching for the location of the Keystone. Of course, the Keystone being essential in us grabbing the black materia. It was always funny to me that Dio just had the Keystone in the gold saucer the whole time. Maybe the original team wanted to let you have one last moment of fun before the impending doom lurking just beyond. Doesn't bother me. In fact, I think Rebirth handles returning to the gold saucer pretty well. One of the biggest expansions was of course the date you could spend with one of the members of your team. Similar to the original, depending on who you've been cultivating the best relationship with, you'd go out on a date with said party member and watch a reenactment of the famous play Loveless, as well as taking a trip on the Sky Wheel. In the original, I obviously went with Aerith since she was my team's main healer, but in Rebirth, I actually ended up going out with Tifa. Now at this point, I was still totally convinced Tifa was going to be the one who died, so I guess subconsciously I had this in mind at all times. Reenacting Loveless with Tifa as the love interest just made sense. I'm not into the whole shipping thing, but seeing Cloud or whoever he's playing go and save Princess Tifa was fun. Yeah, sure, technically it's in the original too, but this is next level. Don't even care that it's a Force QuickTime event. If anything, it makes it better. You'd think I'd be ticked off seeing this shit, but man, I just can't help it. It's just a good time overall. And woo, baby, that Skywheel date hits different, I'll tell ya. It's weird. These two have known each other their entire lives. They've been through so much both separately and together. Pretty fitting for it to be Tifa I'd spend this time with, considering she's been a pretty heavy focus as I've gone through these Final Fantasy games recently. I can only think of a few moments where a video game has gotten a genuine emotional reaction out of me, and this right here is one of them. Two characters I've always really liked sharing a heartfelt moment together. You've got away with some bullshit, Cloud, but this one time, you go get some. This next part is pretty strange. So after your date with your respective party member, Cloud would go off and ask Dio if you could borrow the keystone, which he is happy to part with in exchange for some entertainment. You partook in this tournament where you took on waves of enemies to see how far you could go. It was cool because it masked the feeling of grinding by having this occur the one time. Plus there was this inherent desire to want to go as far as you possibly could using just Cloud. Rebirth does adapt this in a sense, but now Dio has this beef with Don Corneo from Wall Market. So now he wants us to act as his champions in battle to see who's gonna run the gold saucer going forward. It's not a big deal really, but now we have all these mandatory cutscenes where Corneo's troupe have to introduce every match like, and now round 2 where Cloud and company need to fight monsters or whatever. I appreciate wanting to put on a show, I really do, but I'm kinda on a schedule. Gotta make sure Sephiroth doesn't destroy the planet here. Finally, let's get the keystone and peace on out of here. Or not? Yeah, this is what I meant when I said this part was weird. In the original, you'd get the keystone, only for Cait Sith to steal it a little later and give it to Shinra. But here, before we even get the keystone, Cait Sith turns code and runs off with the keystone on behalf of Shinra. Then we have another boss fight with Rude and Elena. Seriously? I kicked both of your asses earlier. Like, we need to get the keystone and Cait Sith is kind of getting away. You guys want to just move, please? Rufus too? I kicked your ass in the last game. Are you seriously back for more? Alright, fuckboy, come get these hands. What, you think I'm scared of you? Nah, come get it, pal. Yeah, yeah! Whew, that felt good. Oh, would you look at that? Cait Sith successfully handed the keystone to Shinra. Great job wasting your time fighting these peasants. Thanks, jerk. Well, I guess we better go chase after them before they go and screw things up even more. But before we get into that, I have one last little gripe I need to talk about. If it wasn't made apparent already, I went and did everything there was to possibly do in Rebirth. Yeah, that's right. I activated all the Remwave towers, fought all the optional monster challenges, dominated every game of Queen's Blood I entered, examined every live stream, researched every Titan materia, and I even did every single goddamn proto-relic challenge. If I was going to play this game, I was going to do it right. And if you made it this far in the video, you should now understand how grueling of a task this was. But my sanity be damned, I did everything Rebirth had to throw at me. But there was one thing I unfortunately could not complete, and shockingly through no mistake of my own. You see, once you've done everything the game has to offer, including all of Chadley's requests, you're thrown one final side quest. Can't stop, won't stop. This side quest brings back the Middle Manager, a one-off character from one of the train sequences in Remake. Bro's hosting the end game side quest and still can't even get a name. Man is down horrendous. This douchebag was given leave of absence after the Sector 7 plate crash, and he's been spending that time refining his skills and attractions here at the Gold Saucer. On the surface, this seems like your ordinary endgame side quest, going through a bunch of challenges that are more difficult. Totally fine with that. And things were going well too, until I got to the G-Bike minigame. You have to get a minimum score of 32,000. Seems like a lot, but I did end up getting the required score. twice. On both occasions, the game just didn't register my score. I mean, fucking look at it. I'm clearly ahead of the intended score. Why can't I progress? So naturally, I searched online, and I wasn't the only person who dealt with this. You know, I thought we had day one patches to avoid shit like this. Now I have to wait for a new patch to go back and do something I had no fun doing? Fuck that. I seriously considered scrapping this whole video when this happened. After all the bullshit I had to go through, there really is no worse feeling than being locked out from finishing everything because of a glitch. I did nothing wrong. I did everything the game asked of me. And this is my reward? It's like Rebirth knew I was going to trash it, and this was its way of saying, ha ha ha, do one, pal. Like, even to this day, I think about popping Rebirth back into my PS5 so I can get that last trophy. But I'm trying to make a point out of this. This is all my fault, really. I should have seen it coming. I mean, this has been Rebirth's entire shtick, mesmerizing me with gorgeous visuals to distract me from the amount of shite I have to put up with. Is this really okay? Are we really gonna let the AAA reinterpretation of Final Fantasy VII get away with this? Sure, it's been patched out and maybe I'm just being a jerk, but this can't happen. I mean, Remake had its fair share of glitches back on the PS4, but not to this degree. Maybe we shouldn't spend all this time making these games these massive blockbusters so we can avoid problems like this in the future. Sounds like a pretty fair compromise to me. Lord, I better move on to the Temple of the Ancients before I say something I'll really regret.
There's so much tension.
Waves did a number on the old gal. Gonna give her a once-over. You go on ahead.
So now, we've reached the point of no return. Once you enter the Temple of the Ancients, there's no turning back. You're in it till the end now. I wish I could sit here and give credit because I have to say, what a transformation. You never really got the sense we were exploring a temple whilst walking amongst 2D JPEGs. And luckily that restraint is now a thing of the past because this place is just insane. I'll give it this, at just about every turn, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth constantly has me oohing and ahhing anytime I see a new set piece for the first time. It's really a shame then, because this place blows. Shouldn't be surprised, really. We're near the end now, so it makes sense that things would drag out like this and force us to engage with this labyrinth-esque design, these awful gravity puzzles, and by far the most dreadful Aerith section to date. Definitely not as bad as the Cait Sith section, but oh man, it ain't far behind. Jeez, what gives, man? Why the need to slow me down like this? I think the worst thing you can do to convey a character is to shoehorn their purpose into gameplay, and that's exactly what happens here. Can't take Aerith at her word that she's etc. Have to actually make her summon life stream magic to hammer home the point. Gotta make sure everyone knows what Aerith can do. Again, this is when I think the whole show don't tell thing goes a little too far. There was never a need to go on this long fetch quest because this was conveyed so elegantly in the original. If it didn't hit you that Aerith is one with the planet when she got down on her stomach as soon as we reached the temple's ancients, that's a you problem. And oh, that's not all because we have not one, but two fights with Shinra. Really, dude? I just fought y'all back on the gold saucer. Can you guys just take the hint already? You don't want these hands. I wish I had more to offer here, but that's all there is really. The original handled the temple in a similar manner, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that all of it was fun, but beyond random encounters, the stops were minimal. Like most of the original, you went in and did and saw what you needed to do and bounced. It had memorable set pieces for sure, but it didn't overstay its welcome, and it served as a perfect teaser for what Sephiroth had in store. And the stuff that is adapted from the original I quite enjoy. The Red Dragon and Demon Gate boss fights are both masterfully recreated. They both do a great job emphasizing Rebirth's biggest strengths. But it begs the question that I've been asking this whole video, and it's in the Temple of the Ancients where things really flip on its head. Hate to say it, but anything you knew about the original Final Fantasy VII going forward can now be considered null and void, because it's here where Rebirth starts to make the biggest changes this series has seen yet. After making your way through what could be the longest individual sequence in any video game ever, Cloud and the team reach the Hall of Resurrection. Aerith explains if we want to obtain the Black Materia, everyone on the team has to go on their own individual trial to overcome a traumatic experience from their past, all except for Cloud. Cue to extended FMVs of characters being tortured or sad about how miserable their lives are. I'm not trying to be rude in what's obviously meant to be an extended look into these characters' backstories, but geez, we already know all this. And it highlights again why characters like Yuffie are forced in. Hypothetically, if this stupid quest was in the original, there's no way Yuffie would have to embark on this because again, there was totally a chance you could miss her. But now it's tying in new remake trilogy bullshit that I don't care about, let alone the fact that this doesn't fit the story we're trying to tell at all. I think it's the timing of it all. I just had to go through one of the worst sections in the entire game. Having to do this now is just aggravating. And all it's doing is delaying the inevitable. And man, that's just the beginning. Once you finish what I can only call the walk of shame here, you finally obtain the black materia and make your escape before the temple closes in on itself. Of course, this is where Cait Sith returns to redeem himself of his transgressions from earlier. After making your escape though, you may be wondering why we still have the black materia. Well, that's because Rebirth needs to remind us that tensions are running high, which inevitably leads to Sephiroth obtaining the black materia like this.
That's mine.
Fine, fetch.
Sephiroth.
Whatever, man, who even cares? Instead of Cloud handing the materia to Sephiroth for then unexplained reasons in the original, really hammering home the point that Sephiroth is that guy, Barrett just drops the materia. Nice one, dumbass. Oh, but Sephiroth can't just up and vanish like he did before. Now he needs to sick the revived Whispers of Fate on Cloud and Aerith. You already have the black materia, dude. Aren't you needed at some important place? Nah, don't worry about that. Let's go see what Zack's up to. Because it's been far too long since we saw him. So while Cloud and company were off trying to save the world, we cut to Zack remembering Marlene telling him about who's going to kill Aerith, obviously describing Sephiroth. So I'm assuming this memory spurs Zack to figure out a way to help out if he can. I have no idea if that's right, and I'm given no time to figure it out because immediately after this we cut to Cloud and Aerith waking up in Ifalna's house where Aerith tells Cloud she wants to go on a date. Even the way it's set up is whack. Apparently this is the last day of like the world's existence or something. So Aerith wants to spend time with who she thinks is the most important person in her life. Because Rebirth spent so much of the early and mid game focused on Cloud's relationship with Tifa, we have to shoehorn in one last cutscene to remind you who Cloud originally had his eyes on when this story was first told. Once again, no subtlety. I know exactly where this is heading, and it's no coincidence this scene was placed here. Then Rebirth decides to play back and forth with itself because we cut back to Zack reaching one of the Shinra reactors when he tries stopping Biggs from bombing the place. They shared this admittedly heartfelt moment, but it was kind of hard for me to get attached because it's been almost 80 hours now, and I still have no idea why these two are even here. And buddy, if you think I'm antagonizing the game here, oh, you don't even know, my guy. Biggs gets shot by Shinra troopers and a recreation of Zack's final stand starts only for the man himself to finally figure things out.
This is my life. I make the rules. See you never!
Well, I guess it all makes sense now. Zack's here, alive and well to defy fate. It's just, there's a little thing. You know, not a big deal, but... Defy whose fate? You already survived your final stand. What's doing it again going to prove? Oh, and now you think you can just go take on Sephiroth? Get real, dude! And wait, what? Oh, Aerith and Cloud. Whew, okay, I was scared there. Well, looks like the date's coming to an end. Aerith hands Cloud the white materia and... Wait, again? No. Stop. Please. Please don't do this. Oh.
Behold, the true nature of reality. When the boundaries of fate are breached, new worlds are born. The planet encompasses a multitude of worlds, ever unfolding. Some quickly perish, while others endure. Yet even the most resilient worlds are doomed to fade. Nevertheless, their loss is not to be mourned. For it is not death, but a homecoming that awaits them. in the planet's embrace, all life is as one.
Well, there it is. Here's the moment we've all been waiting for, everyone. The moment this remake trilogy has been building up to for almost a decade. The moment where your perception of Final Fantasy VII is shattered. Sephiroth pretty much just confirmed what every fan thought after watching the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake. This isn't a retelling of the original FF7. This is just one of many possible scenarios in the Final Fantasy VII multiverse. That's right, you heard me correctly. The Final Fantasy VII multiverse. Now, all the changes finally come together. The shoehorned and then currently thrown out Aerith revival plot, Sephiroth's constant presence, not to mention Zack's new arc. It was all building up to this. Fuck it, what else do I need to say? I should end the video off right now, because now everything we've been doing is meaningless. Does stopping Sephiroth really affect the outcome of things now? The multiverse will clearly keep chugging along, pooping out new scenarios as it deems fit. And what this does is rob Final Fantasy VII of its most important trait. Regardless of what you think of it, the story of this game is one of the most iconic narratives ever told throughout the medium. It was a tale that was personal, yet still held up alongside the name of the series it was being told in. Google any interview from back then and the developers will tell you just how much of themselves they let show in the story and through these characters. And what it did for the industry as a whole cannot be overlooked. Almost overnight, it became a hit. Final Fantasy VII changed the industry. It showed us we had time to tell a story amongst all the slashing and bashing we'd be doing. Even to this day, creators all over the world look to FF7 for inspiration. It was because of the story it told that made these characters and these locations so iconic to begin with. Introducing a multiverse structure robs the very essence of narrative. If new scenarios can be introduced, what's the point of solving the issues in the world we're currently in? Fuck, who's to say what we're doing is even real? It's 2024 and SquareEnix directors, writers, and scenario specialists are turning to MCU-level storytelling to convey the themes of Final Fantasy VII. I just can't. How this robs Final Fantasy VII of its essence is now the game is straight up telling me that these characters are more important than the narrative they're supposed to be serving. Everyone's just a fucking Avenger now. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here. If there can be multiple scenarios, I guess as long as Cloud is there, we're going to save the day. It doesn't matter how many times Sephiroth tries, the planet will make sure the events that are supposed to unfold do just that. As I understand it, the planet is going to continuously pump out new universes. So if this is to be believed, that means Cloud is always going to be there on the train. Sephiroth will always flash his head up in Nibelheim. It doesn't matter what changes are made. The events will always play out the same, as deemed by the will of the planet. Combine that with all the other bullshit we had to do, all the slow moments for fun and games, all the side quests focus on bonding one-on-one with each character. With all that in the way, is there any time left for the story? By the time you get here, you'll be so jaded that it won't even hit you and you'll have to go on YouTube and search Final Fantasy VII Rebirth ending explained or what have you. I mean, here I am making a video on this and even I have questions. With all this in mind, what does this mean going forward? Is the inevitable horizon looming in the distance not going to matter now? Should I roll credits here? Well, we're too far in to back out now.
Thanks for returning it to me, Cloud. I appreciate it. But now, it belongs with you.
Now, before I can delve into this very important section of Rebirth, I need to discuss the original's interpretation of the Forgotten Capital. Because if I want to comment on how Rebirth changes things, I need to talk about what it's adapting. If I could pick one moment in Final Fantasy VII that I think truly elevated it into the title we regard as an all-time classic, I could pick none better than the Forgotten Capital. You finally reached the location Sephiroth told you about back in the ancient temple. So at this point, you were prepared to face Sephiroth and bring him to an end once and for all. What you weren't expecting were the actual events that transpired. You approached the altar, Buster Blade in hand ready to slash at Aerith, only for your friends to snap you out of your gaze. Aerith raises her head almost in a way of reassurance, and then it happens. This right here is what I believe to be the greatest moment in any video game ever. I'm so serious when I say that. This is the moment where video games became cool. It was Game of Thrones before Game of Thrones. Your main healer and the most important person in Cloud's life gets killed off. Your entire mind was blown. Your perception of video game was shattered. And what follows is an almost transcendent boss fight against the Jenova Life Clinger. You couldn't even take a moment to just let it sink in. We still have a mission to accomplish after all. After all that, finally Cloud does whatever he can in the moment to make peace with the fact that Aerith is really gone. She's not coming back. Man, reading this out, I'm starting to tear up a bit. The greatest strength of this moment is the fact that it speaks for itself. No need for dialogue, no need for the character to ooh and ah before the climactic moment happens. Death can happen at any moment. Its sudden nature is what makes it so devastating. In a miraculous feat, Square were able to craft a moment so legendary it has stood the test of time itself. No 4x3 low frame rate pre-rendered cutscene can take away from that. As you can gather then, Rebirth says to all that, because now the Forgotten Capital is this place where we have to tie everything this trilogy has changed so far into one. That's right, at the most iconic scene of the game, it's here where Rebirth decides it wants to bring everything together before part 3. Oh man, where do I even start with this one? After Cloud gets pooped out of the multiverse lair, he and his companions give chase where Cloud shares a moment with everyone individually. Yeah, remember when I said the characters are more important to the story? Do you believe me now? Fuck, what kind of friend annoys you with all these questions or admissions of guilt right after one of your friends has been taken? Cloud fucking vanished and you're still talking about the Keystone incident, Kate Sith? Will you just get out of here? When you approach the capital, of course, you get, I'd say 2, maybe 3 waves of Whispers of Fate. No biggie, you can handle them, then you get your standard cutscenes to break things up, and eventually, Cloud approaches the altar. Here it is, Rebirth's interpretation of the most iconic scene in gaming. Let's see here. Cloud goes to slash Aerith, but the Whispers of Fate circle around to stop him. Then he looks up and sees Sephiroth come down, so he says no, and oh my god, he stopped him. Wait, no, seriously, he blocked Sephiroth's stab. I can't believe it. They did it. They actually went ahead and saved Aerith. I don't know what to think right now. Wait, what? But I thought Cloud blocked his... She's supposed to be... What is happening? I am so lost. I thought because there was a multiverse of FF7 worlds, the events would play out the same. So why did Cloud save Aerith only for things to get all staticky and change? Is Aerith dead? Did we save her? What is going on here? Oh shit, Jenova boss fight. I can't even take a chance to make sense of what happened. And if you were expecting this to be the end, I hate to be the one that tells you this, but Rebirth pulls what I can only call a Final Fantasy VII Remake maneuver and adds in another boss fight with Sephiroth, this time featuring Zack. Yep, guess he found a way to defy fate after all. Man, if you thought the Advent Children recreation from Remake was egregious, we'd need to find a whole new term to define what Rebirth does. It's once again this multi-tiered boss fight with multiple phases that splits the characters up, brings them back together, and features things I didn't even know were possible in Final Fantasy. Seriously, look at this fucking thing. Sephiroth reborn, huh? Wow, subtlety has completely gone out of the window, hasn't it? But there could be no bigger fuck you than the final phase, a 2v1 against Sephiroth that sees Cloud and Aerith team up one last time, because we couldn't just let her stay away from all this. Can I even say all this is fun? It's definitely exciting, and that rendition of One Winged Angel is soothing my ears more than you could ever know, but I can't justify this. There's so much to unravel here, I don't even know where to start. First off, Sephiroth obviously knows his own fate, so I have to ask, why the fuck would you try and kill Aerith again? Unless it truly is not the same one, and we have multiple Sephiroths, It's why I thought Tifa was going to die. The entire game has framed Sephiroth in such a way that he knows he's going to have to do something he didn't do, or at the very least change what he did last time. It was because of the actions he made in the original that spelled his ultimate demise, and killing Aerith was the catalyst. It was after this where Cloud admitted he's afraid of who he really is, leading you to believe he hasn't been acting like his true self. But it was because of this fear and the fact that he wanted to learn the truth about himself that spurs him on to hunt down Sephiroth. Gee, Sephiroth, if you know you're gonna lose, maybe you shouldn't be making the same fucking mistakes. And if you're gonna tell me he didn't know what's gonna happen, then what the fuck? Why all the interruptions? Why the multiverse bus ride? Everything he said would be null and void if he had no idea how things would turn out. Man, what a buzzkill. Sephiroth used to be so fucking cool too. Probably my favorite villain in anything ever. His presence was so unique in the original, and it's that, tied with his killer design, that made him so iconic in the first place. It was because his presence was so commanding that it didn't matter if he knew the outcome or not. The feeling in the room was that he did. The game never had to tell us if he knew more, so you can make your own assumptions, and it's little things like this that enhance what was already such a special character. And I mean everyone else too. They really should be ashamed of themselves. Barrett, Tifa, Yuffie, Nanaki, and Kate Sith are all along for the ride as far as Rebirth is concerned. Just here to remind you that they exist and nothing more. And Cloud, Aerith, and Zack, I guess. I mean, what more needs to be said? We got two characters that literally shouldn't even be here. Aerith, because she died before all this kicked off moments ago, and Zack, because he's been dead since before the game even started. It's just, none of it makes any sense. This set piece literally exists so the game can say you had a boss fight with Sephiroth. That's it. Him being here after he kills Aerith doesn't add anything to the story. This big fight doesn't change anything. His new form means fuck all because we already know how this story ends. If the game had ended on a hard cut after Aerith's death like the original first disc did, it may have been praised from an artistic point of view, but critically it would have been dogged on. So what better way to fool players into thinking there's this epic boss fight with this epic music and all these crazy particles flying everywhere than a boss fight against the man himself? It just feels irresponsible. If you had to add more after the boss fight with Jenova, fine, whatever. But all this does is highlight every single issue. It feels like a conglomeration of every problem put together. The shameless padding, the reckless changes, and the destruction of every character involved, all wrapped up into one. And you'd think that'd be the end of it, that Rebirth's finally had enough fun toying with my sanity. But it even found a way to grind my gear one last time. Once you defeat Sephiroth, Zack returns to his Final Fantasy universe, promising to return one day, while Cloud and the rest of the team take a moment to mourn Aerith's death. Except, psych! Nah, no worries, she's gonna see us off one last time, or so you think. The final scene of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has our characters planning their next move in their pursuit of Sephiroth, but before they can leave, Cloud and Aerith share one last conversation. So is Aerith dead? Is she alive? Has Cloud completely lost his mind, or no promises await at Journey's end? No! Come back! I am lost! And not in the way I would like. Fuck. This game is ass. And that, ladies, gentlemen, and chocobo enthusiasts everywhere, was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I mean, what else is there for me to say, guys? I think you get it by now. If I had known this would be the outcome of what I originally believed to be a faithful adaptation of the 1997 classic, I wouldn't have even bothered. Lesson learned, you don't always need to let your curiosity get the best of you. It's really sad. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I had a great time running around these vast spaces, taking in these gorgeous vistas, but I can't. I don't really know what to make of Rebirth, honestly. As I saw the credits roll, I sat there in utter silence trying to collect my thoughts. Because when it comes down to it, there is a lot here I really enjoyed. There's so much I never even got into that genuinely put a smile on my face. Maybe I'm sniffing that copium glue a little too hard these days, but I think because I wanted to like this game so badly, my softer side came out a bit more than I was anticipating. There are seriously so many times where I'd go bother my roommate so I could go tell him about the latest wacky cool thing I did. And aren't moments like that what it's really all about? But I think where it really matters, Rebirth misses the point entirely. I'd go so far to say that Rebirth intends to miss the point. Think about it. Why change things if your intent was to faithfully adapt the original? What other reason can you think of to justify the multiverse plot? It's all to instill this idea that remakes, remasters as we know them, are a complete farce to creators. Man, it all goes back to that quote from Nomura before Remake came out, where you need to have a desire to change Final Fantasy if you want to work on such a storied franchise. They can say whatever they want in their marketing runs, but I can see right through them. The proof is in the pudding after all. Clearly, all of their eyes are set on working on new stuff. It's a shame then that the shareholder powers that be are forcing such talented individuals to work on old material they clearly have no intrinsic interest in. And this struggle to appease both sides dilutes the product we fans end up getting years later. When you try and please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. I would have loved a single entry recreation of the original with these gorgeous visuals. Fuck, I can leave the new battle system behind. The visuals and presentation are enough, but if there's a burning desire that's coursing through everyone involved, then fuck it, go wild with new stuff. Show me shit with these characters we've never seen before. I would rather they go buck wild with it than try and force this happy middle ground. The way it is now, I can't see anyone being pleased. It alienates fans of the original who just wanted it to be adapted for the modern day, and as it attempts to hook in new fans, it alienates them because quite frankly, they'll have no idea what's going on because you need to have fucking played the original Final Fantasy VII and a bunch of optional stuff to know what's going on in the first place. It ends up feeling mashed together so it can't possibly satisfy everyone. It's a game that's born from the spirit of those who demanded Final Fantasy VII be brought back. It's a game born from the spite of its creators. It's a game that never stood a chance no matter which way you look at it. When all is said and done in this trilogy, what will Rebirth's legacy be? Because I'd argue this is easily the one that's going to be most forgotten as time passes on. You'll never forget Remake because it showed us what was possible when Final Fantasy VII was given a chance with updated hardware. And you won't forget the end because, well, it's the end. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will eventually be looked at as the awkward middle child of the bunch. And I mean, this is just me, but I think that's quite a shame. I mean, what was the point of any of this if that's the eventual outcome? I've purposely been avoiding bringing up those involved because I wanted to look at the art itself. Quotes and shit like that, at least to me, rarely, if ever, translate to the final product. Because as I always say in these videos, we will never understand what the scenes are like behind the making of our favorite games. But one comment I can't let slip by was made by the game's main director, Naoki Hamaguchi. Right after the Metacritic score of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had been published, Hamaguchi said, "To reach review scores over 90 was one of the goals as a development team to reach fans and welcome new ones as well." I guess there you have it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I guess by extension every single entry in this trilogy, isn't being made to faithfully adapt the original. It isn't rebirthing anything either. They tossed out the Aerith revival plot, I'm pretty sure, so who's to say Zack will return like he so confidently says? Who's to say Sephiroth isn't going to make the same mistakes again, but this time tossing in a bunch of fake-outs in between? From this point forward, nothing can be the same, yet I have a pretty sure feeling we're going to try and adapt stuff from discs 2 and 3 with all the same changes we've come to expect, while trying to introduce new plot lines in a vain attempt to keep things interesting. I mean, what's the point really? If you didn't kill the spirit of the original Final Fantasy VII in Remake, then I'd say you did a smashing job here in Rebirth. That's honestly how I feel. One of the worst realizations I came to while working on this video is now, after spending all this time doing things that really bothered me and watching the ruination of one of my favorite stories play out, is that I just don't care about this entry in Final Fantasy as much as I used to. Everything I loved about the 1997 classic is pretty much gone now, replaced with assets and models that are nothing but a shadow of the original design's intent. And if all this starts tainting my view on the visuals, that's how you know it's bad. You know, it's funny. It was this remake trilogy that really reignited my love for Final Fantasy, and in a way, is the reason I'm standing here today. It was only after going through both the original and the remake back in 2020 where this journey really started. In many aspects, this video serves as a sequel to all the other videos you've seen about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because by all accounts, Rebirth doesn't just avoid fixing issues found in its predecessor, it doubles down and introduces a whole load of issues on top of all that. I don't care where they go from here because as far as I'm concerned, they've already fucked it for themselves. And no matter what they try and do, one single entry isn't enough to fix the damage that's already been done. I'm not interested anymore. And going forward, no amount of curiosity is going to change that. For a lot of people, they're going to get exactly what they want, but there's just as many, if not more people still scratching their heads as to what they just saw. This series may be definitively titled the Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy, but in this pursuit of reimagining classic titles for the modern day, we kill the very spirit that made this title so legendary in the first place. And if the essence of what we're trying to reimagine dies along the way, well, I start to wonder if this endeavor was worth it in the first place.